Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Relaxing. Tonight we step down into the cold earth as winter gathers itself above you. Snow is already learning the shape of the land. Wind is stretching its shoulders. You're standing at the mouth of a low opening, fingers stiff breath, thin and visible, knowing that in a few moments you will trade sky for soil. This is one of those moments history rarely pauses to admire. It just expects you to move. You probably will not survive this if you hesitate too long. Not because the idea is dramatic, but because cold does not negotiate, it waits. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening late, let me know where you are and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights. You lower yourself down, boots scraping packed dirt, shoulders angling to fit. The temperature changes immediately, not warmer exactly, but steadier. Above ground, cold attacks in gusts. Down here it arrives like a held breath. The ceiling is low enough that you instinctively duck even after clearing it. Old habits cling fast when survival is involved. You settle onto bedding that smells faintly of earth and smoke. The ground beneath you is firm, unyielding, and oddly reassuring. This is not comfort in the modern sense. No mattress and springs, no soft assurances, but it is dependable. Underground shelters were used across many cultures during harsh winters, from sod dugouts on the American plains to semi-subterranean homes in Northern Europe. That is a mainstream historical fact easy to overlook because it sounds so quiet compared to castles and battles. Yet for long stretches of history, sleeping below ground was not a novelty. It was a strategy. As you stretch out, you notice the sound first, or rather the lack of it. The wind is still there, you know it is. You felt it moments ago trying to peel heat from your face. But now it is muffled, filtered through layers of soil and sod. The storm has been wrapped in cloth. Your breathing feels loud by comparison, as if the earth is listening back. The first minutes are restless. Your body has not yet decided whether this place is safe. Muscles stay half engaged. Fingers twitch. You test the walls with the back of your hand, pressing gently as though the earth might answer. It does in its way. Solid, cool, unmoved by your concerns. People who first slept underground often describe this moment as the hardest. Not the coldest nights. Not the longest stormier, but the initial surrender to being surrounded. Historians still argue whether this discomfort was more psychological than physical, whether fear of collapse outweighed actual danger. Most collapses, after all, happened during construction, not occupation. Once finished, these spaces tended to hold. You listen again. Somewhere above, snow is being rearranged by the wind. You cannot hear individual flakes, but you sense the accumulation in the pressure of silence. It feels heavier, like a blanket being slowly layered on. Underground weight is something you feel more than see. There is a quirky detail buried in winter letters from settlers on the Great Plains. Some mention that after a few nights underground, they stopped dreaming about the weather entirely. No blizzards, no storms, no wind chasing them. Their dreams shifted inward toward memory and routine. It is a small thing, but it hints at how quickly the mind adapts when the environment stops demanding constant vigilance. You shift your legs, tucking them closer. Heat behaves differently here. It does not rush. It gathers. Soil absorbs warmth during the day, evened weak winter daylight, and releases it slowly at night. Modern science explains this with thermal mass, but you do not need equations to feel it. You feel it in your calves first, then along your back. The ceiling stays cool, reminding you where warmth prefers to settle. Your breath slows without asking permission. The air smells faintly damp, not unpleasant, just honest. Earth has a smell that cannot be replicated above ground. It carries minerals, moisture, time. Smoke lingers too, for earlier fires used to dry the space. That smell tells you someone was here before you, preparing the thinking ahead. You're not alone in the timeline, even if you are alone in the room. Above ground, winter nights are full of small negotiations. Where to block drafts, How much fuel to burn, whether the roof will hold. Down here, many of those questions have already been answered by design. That does not make you safe from everything, but it changes the odds. It shifts effort from constant defense to quiet endurance. You close your eyes for a moment, then open them again. Darkness underground is complete. Not nighttime darkness which still remembers the sun. This is darkness without direction. You lose track of where your feet end and the wall begins unless you move. It is unsettling, but also strangely fair. Everyone is equal in the dark. Your thoughts drift, then return, then drift again. You think about the people who slept like this for entire seasons, families, children, elders. It is easy to romanticize, but daily life underground was practical, repetitive, sometimes tedious. That may be why it worked. Survival favors boring solutions. A gust hits the surface hard enough that you feel it through the ground, a faint vibration like distant thunder. The earth absorbed most of it. You imagine snow piling against the entrance, sealing it further. That thought would have terrified you earlier. Now it feels like reinforcement. You adjust your bedding once more, then stop. Movement stirs cold air. Stillness allows warmth to pool. This is a lesson learned quickly underground. The less you fight the environment, the more it works with you. It is not kindness, it is physics. Your eyelids grow heavier, not from exhaustion, but from relief. The storm can rage. You are not required to respond. For tonight at least, the earth is doing the work. The earth does not announce itself as shelter. It never says welcome. You learn what it offers only by staying long enough to notice patterns. As you lie there, the ground begins to feel less like a surface and more like a presence. It presses back just enough to remind you it is there doing its quiet work. You become aware of how little the temperature moves. Outside winter swings wildly. Wind surges, retreats, returns sharper. Snow falls harder, then pauses, then starts again with a different sound. Down here, the change is subtle. The air cools by degrees you can barely track. It feels less like weather and more like time passing slowly. This is where soil earns its reputation. Earth-sheltered homes rely on the insulating properties of packed dirt and sod which trap air and resist rapid temperature shifts. That is a straightforward historical reality. Settlers, farmers and herders did not need thermometers to understand it. They felt it in their bones. They noticed that nights underground were survivable when nights above ground were punishing. You run your palm along the wall beside you. The texture is rough, uneven, cool without being icy. Moisture clings faintly, not enough to drip, just enough to be known. This balance matters. Too dry and dust fills the air. Too wet and cold creeps faster. Someone figured this out before you arrived. You benefit from their trial and error. Your breathing steadies further. Each inhale brings air that has already been softened by the earth. It feels heavier, slower. Above ground, air moves freely, stealing heat as it goes. Below ground, it lingers. It does not rush away from you. That small difference changes everything. There is an old observation tucked into frontier diaries that rarely gets attention. Some writers noted that underground shelters felt warmer at night even when fires were smaller. The quirky detail is that people sometimes worried something was wrong, as if warmth, without visible effort, felt suspicious. They'd grown used to equating comfort with constant labour. Earth challenged that assumption. You shift your shoulders, settling more fully. The ceiling feels close enough to matter, but not close enough to threaten. You notice how your sense of scale adjusts. Above ground distance reassures you. Space means escape routes, sightlines, options. Down here, closeness becomes the reassurance. Everything you need is within reach. Everything else is kept out by layers of dirt and sod. Historians still argue whether people chose underground sleeping primarily for warmth or for protection from wind. The answer shifts depending on region and period. In open plains, wind stripped heat faster than low temperatures alone. Underground wind lost its advantage. It could not reach you directly. It had to ask permission from the soil first. You listen again not because you expect danger, but because listening has become a habit. The sound of the storm above has changed. It is duller now, as if snow has thickened its own insulation. That tells you time is passing. Underground, you measure hours by sound shifts rather than light. The smell of earth grows more familiar. It stops demanding attention. Smoke lingers faintly, a reminder of earlier preparation. Fires underground were used sparingly, often more for drying than heating. An open flame consumed oxygen quickly. People learned to trust the ground more than the fire. That trust had limits, but it was usually well placed. You notice how your body relaxes in stages. First your jaw unclenches, then your hands stop curling inward. Finally your legs extend a little, no longer guarding heat as tightly. This progression feels automatic now, but it was learned. The body remembers what works. There is something quietly humbling about realizing the earth does not care who you are. It offers the same insulation to everyone. Wealth, status, plans for spring, none of it changes how soil holds heat. That equality was not philosophical, it was practical. When winter arrived, everyone negotiated with the same ground. You think about the layers above you: snow, sod, packed dirt. Each one slows the transfer of cold. Together they create a barrier that is not rigid but resilient. It bends rather than breaks. Wind presses down, but the pressure spreads outward instead of downward. You feel protected not by strength but by distribution. A small movement near the entrance catches your attention. Not a sound exactly, more a change in air pressure, snow shifting, maybe more accumulation. You imagine the opening becoming narrower, more sealed. That would have worried you earlier. Now it feels like reinforcement, another layer added without effort. Your thoughts wander to people who slept this way for the months at a time. How they learned to trust the earth enough to truly rest. How they stopped waking at every gust. That trust did not arrive immediately. It grew with each uneventful night. There is a modern temptation to see underground living as primitive or desperate. That misses the point. It was efficient. It worked. People used the materials available to solve the problems they faced. Winter demanded insulation. Earth provided it generously. Your breathing deepens. The ground beneath you feels less like something you're lying on, and more like something you're leaning into. It supports your weight without complaint. It does not sag or shift. That reliability invites sleep. The storm continues its work above, but it feels distant now, almost abstract. Down here, the earth has taken responsibility for the night. You allow it to. You notice the sound before you can describe it. Or maybe it is the absence of sound that finally gets your attention. Above ground, storms announce themselves constantly. Wind slaps wood. Snow rasps against walls. Ice ticks and cracks as the temperatures shift. Down here, the sharp edges are gone. What reaches you has been rounded off, smoothed by layers of soil that refuse to pass anything along at full strength. You tilt your head slightly, listening. The storm is still working, you know that. You felt its urgency earlier, the way it pressed cold into every gap it could find. Now it arrives as a low, distant presence, more pressure than noise. It feels like being underwater while rain hits the surface above. Sound behaves differently underground. It does not travel far, it does not bounce the same way. Your own movements seem louder than the storm itself. When you shift your weight, the bedding rustles with exaggerated clarity. Your breath sounds close, intimate, almost intrusive. Everything else feels far away. This has consequences you did not anticipate. Silence above ground often signals danger. It can mean exposure, that the world is waiting to notice you. Silence below ground feels like insulation. It wraps around you, blunting sharp edges, making the outside world less demanding. There is a mainstream historical observation buried in accounts from miners and earth-sheltered dwellers alike. Many noted that underground spaces altered their perception of time and threat because sound no longer provided constant updates. Without wind noise, people stopped reacting to every change in weather. Their nervous systems rested. It was not that danger disappeared, but that the signal to panic was softened. You lie still and listen again. somewhere far above windshift's direction. You can tell not by hearing it directly, but by feeling a subtle change in pressure, a gentle settling of the air. The earth passes along the message, slowly stripped of urgency. There is no alarm in it. A quirky detail shows up in some winter journals from the 19th century. People sometimes wrote that storms felt shorter underground even when they lasted longer. Without the soundtrack of howling wind and rattling boards, hours blurred together. Time lost its sharp markers. Storms became something you endured without constantly noticing. Your mind, deprived of noise, starts filling the space with its own sounds. Memories surface, snippets of conversation, half-formed thoughts. You notice this happening and let it continue. Underground there is room for mental wandering. The environment is not demanding your attention every second. Historians still argue whether this sensory dampening contributed to better sleep or simply masked danger. There were risks, of course. Collapses flooding poor ventilation. Silence could hide problems as easily as it hid storms, but for many the trade was worth it. Quiet meant rest. Rest meant survival. You adjust your breathing, matching it to the stillness. Slow in, slow out. Each breath seems to sink rather than drift away. The air feels permanent, it does not rush to be replaced. A sudden thump reaches you muted and distant. Snow sliding off something above. The sound arrives soft and almost polite. It does not spike your pulse the way it would have earlier. You register it, note it, then let it go. This is another lesson the underground teaches quickly. Not every sound deserves a reaction. You think about people sleeping above ground right now, the way they negotiate every creak and gust. How wind makes promises it cannot keep. Underground, those promises never reach you intact. The earth edits them first. Your ears adapt. What once felt like silence now feels full. Tiny sounds become meaningful. The faint scrape of fabric as you move, the quiet pop of cooling earth. Even your heartbeat seems louder, a steady reminder that you are here, that you are warm enough. There is a strange intimacy in this soundscape. Above ground noise connects you to the world. Below ground, it connects you to yourself. That can be unsettling at first. Without distraction, thoughts echo more clearly, but after a while the echo softens. Thoughts slow, they begin to drift rather than collide. You remember how earlier you felt alert, almost tense, listening for danger. That vigilance has eased, not because you have decided nothing can go wrong, but because the environment is no longer shouting at you. It is whispering if it speaks at all. Some underground sleepers develop rituals around sound. They would deliberately make small noises before settling in, tapping walls, shifting bedding, just to learn how the space responded. Once familiar, the silence felt less like absence and more like trust. You find yourself doing something similar, adjusting, slightly listening to how the room answers. The storm above intensifies briefly. You sense it in a deep, dull vibration like distant thunder. The ground absorbs it, spreads it out, makes it manageable. You imagine snow piling higher, wind pressing harder. None of it feels personal anymore. Your eyelids grow heavy again. Sound fades further into the background. The underground has taken control of the night's volume. It has turned the world down to a level you can sleep through. As you settle deeper into stillness, the storm continues its work above, loud and dramatic, telling its story to the open air. Down here, you hear only the quiet ending, the part where everything becomes calm enough to rest. You begin to understand that warmth underground is not something you chase. It is something you allow. Lying still feels counterintuitive at first. Above ground movement keeps blood flowing and fear at bay. Here motion stirs the very air you're trying to keep close. You learn this slowly through small experiments that end in quiet lessons. You shift once, then again testing. Each movement sends a faint ribbon of coolness across your skin. It is not sharp, just noticeable enough to teach you restraint. When you stop moving, the coolness fades. Heat gathers again patiently, like water settling after being disturbed. This becomes your first real adjustment. Underground stillness is not passive. It is active participation. You're cooperating with the space rather than competing against it. The ground rewards this cooperation immediately. Accounts from winter shelters across different regions consistently note this pattern. People learned that conserving warmth required fewer adjustments, not more. Bedding was arranged carefully, then left alone. Bodies were positioned deliberately, then kept that way. It sounds simple, but it ran against instinct for many newcomers. You notice how your breathing changes when you stop fidgeting. It slows, it deepens. Each breath seems to stay closer to you, warming the small pocket of air around your face. You resist the urge to pull covers tighter. That urge passes. The warmth does not escape when you trust it. Your muscles begin to let go in stages. First the shoulders, then the neck, finally the legs, which had stayed slightly tense, ready to move if needed. The underground does not demand readiness. It asks for patience. There is an overlooked detail in several personal winter journals from the 19th century. Some writers mention that they slept better underground after tiring days than after idle ones. Physical labour generated warmth that lingered longer in still bodies. The trick was not to burn it off with restless movement. It was to hold on to it. You test this idea without meaning to. Your body is tired enough to accept stillness. The cold no longer presses. It waits at the edges, respectful but persistent. As long as you do not invite it closer, it stays where it is. Researchers continue to debate whether underground sleepers adapted physiologically over the time, or whether the benefits were purely environmental. Did bodies actually recalibrate to lower variability in temperature, or did the shelter simply reduce stress enough to improve rest? The answer likely involves both. Environment shapes behavior, and behavior reshapes perception. You feel this shift happening in real time. Earlier, every sensation demanded interpretation. Now sensations simply exist. Cool ceiling, warm bedding, firm ground, none of it feels urgent. The darkness contributes to this surrender. Without visual distractions, your body receives fewer signals to adjust. There is nothing to track, nothing to anticipate. The absence of light becomes a form of guidance, gently insisting that you stay where you are. You notice your hands resting on your chest. They are warm now, warmer than you expected. That warmth has nowhere to go burst. The earth keeps it close. Even the air feels thicker, less inclined to steal heat away. A lesser-known practice involved placing heavier items near the feet, not for pressure but to reduce air movement. People learned that weight anchored warmth. It was not about insulation alone, but about stability. Still air holds heat. Moving air steals it. You think about how much effort above ground goes into fighting winter. Shoveling, stoking fires, repairing damage. Down here the work is quieter. It happens in preparation and restraint rather than constant action. You resist the urge to check the walls again. You already know they are there. Touching them will not make them stronger. Trust becomes part of the routine. You trust the ground to stay put. You trust your body to hold heat if you let it. Your breathing synchronizes with the space. Slow inhale, slow exhale. The rhythm feels borrowed, as if the underground itself is setting the pace. You match it without thinking. Another sound reaches you, faint and distant. Wind pressing down, then easing. You do not respond. The sound passes. Stillness wins again. This way of resting feels unfamiliar but effective. It is not indulgent, it is efficient. Survival here is not about comfort as much as conservation. Every unnecessary movement costs heat. Every calm moment preserves it. You imagine someone above ground pacing to stay warm, stamping feet, rubbing hands together. That effort feels exhausting by comparison. Down here, warmth is something you protect by doing less. Over time, this lesson reshapes your relationship with your own body. You begin to notice how often movement is driven by anxiety rather than need. Underground anxiety has fewer outlets. It quiets or it lingers. Tonight, it quiets. Your eyelids grow heavier again. The desire to move fades almost entirely. You find a position that works and commit to it. The ground seems to accept this commitment, offering steady support in return. By now, stillness feels less like restraint and more like alignment. You are no longer resisting the cold, you are outlasting it. The storm above continues its work, but underground warmth has found its rhythm. You settle into that rhythm and let it carry you deeper into rest. The smell reaches you before you fully register what it is. It is not strong, not sharp, but layered. Damp soil sits at the base of it, cool and mineral-rich. Smoke hovers lightly above that, thin and tired from earlier fires. There is also something human in the mix wool skin, breath, the quiet evidence that people have occupied this space and left part of themselves behind. At first, the scent feels unfamiliar enough to keep you awake. Modern noses expect clean separation. Wood should smell like wood. Earth should stay outside. Smoke should vanish once the fire is gone. Underground, nothing separates so neatly. Everything blends and settles. You inhale slowly, testing the air. It does not feel stale. It feels used. That difference matters. Fresh air above ground moves constantly. It is always leaving. Underground air lingers. It carries memory with it. Descriptions from winter shelters often mention smell in passing, rarely with much emotion. That tells you something important. People noticed it at first, then stopped. Scent became background information rather than a signal. Once the smell stabilized, it meant the space was behaving as expected. You notice how your body responds. There is no sharp reaction, no instinct to cough or turn away. The air feels heavy but breathable. That balance was carefully maintained. Too much smoke meant danger, too little meant dampness returned. Keeping the right scent was a sign that everything else was in order. An overlooked habit appears in some personal accounts. People would intentionally burn small amounts of aromatic plants not to perfume the space, but to confirm airflow. If the scent lingered evenly, ventilation was working. If it pooled or vanished too quickly, adjustments were needed. Smell became a diagnostic tool. You think about that now as the scent stays consistent. It neither thickens nor fades. That steadiness reassures you more than sight ever could. Underground smell tells the truth quickly. There is still discussion among scholars about how much time people spent managing underground air quality. Some argue it required constant attention. Others suggest that once properly built, these shelters regulated themselves surprisingly well. Your experience tonight supports the latter. Nothing feels urgent. Nothing demands intervention. You shift slightly and notice the smell change just a fraction. Bedding releases warmth. Wool adds a faint animal note. The air absorbs it without complaint. Everything becomes part of the same atmosphere. Your breathing grows deeper again. Smell as a way of anchoring you in the present. It keeps thoughts from drifting too far. You are here. This is now. The storm can do what it likes above ground. There is a quiet intimacy in sharing air this way. Above ground air belongs to no one. It passes through and forgets you. Underground it feels shared. Every breath contributes. Every exhale stays close. You imagine others sleeping nearby, perhaps separated by only a wall of earth. Their presence would be known not by sight or sound, but by the way the air feels slightly warmer, slightly fuller. Underground living made people aware of each other in subtle ways. A record from the late 19th century mentions that newcomers often complained about the smell for the first few nights. Long-term residents rarely mentioned it at all. Familiarity did not dull their senses, it recalibrated them. You realize the smell has stopped feeling like information. It has become the part of the background, like the pressure of the ground or the weight of bedding. That shift signals acceptance. Your body no longer treats the environment as foreign. The storm above continues, but its presence is abstract now. Down here, the air feels stable. It smells the same from one breath to the next. That consistency invites rest. You close your eyes again. Darkness and scent work together. Without sight, smell takes on more importance, then slowly recedes as well. Your senses agree that nothing needs immediate attention. The earth holds warmth. The air holds memory. Together they create a space that feels occupied even when you're alone. That feeling is strangely comforting. You settle deeper, letting the scent of soil and smoke fade into familiarity. Sleep approaches not because you're exhausted, but because everything finally feels balanced enough to allow it. Darkness underground does not arrive the way it does above. There is no gradual dimming, no long twilight where colours soften and edges blur. Here, darkness is already complete when you notice it. It has been waiting patiently unchanged by the hour or the weather. Once your eyes adjust, you realise they are adjusting to nothing at all. You blink a few times, expecting some detail to emerge. It does not. The darkness holds steady, deep, and even without direction. You cannot tell where the ceiling ends or where the walls curve away. Space becomes something you feel rather than see. This takes time to accept. Above ground, night still carries information. Moonlight sneaks in, snow reflects faint glow, stars hint at scale. Underground light does not negotiate. It simply does not exist unless you bring it with you. When lamps are extinguished, the world closes its eyes. Historical descriptions of underground winter shelters often remark on this sensory shift. People wrote less about what they saw and more about what they felt. Without light, attention moved inward. Time stopped announcing itself through shadow and colour. Nights did not begin so much as continue. You notice how your sense of time loosens. Without sunset or sunrise hours lose their labels. Your body tracks time by hunger, by fatigue, by the slow cooling of extremities. This is not confusion, it is a different clock. You shift your head slightly and realise you cannot tell which direction you're facing without moving your hands. That knowledge does not arrive automatically anymore. It must be confirmed. The darkness removes assumptions. Everything must be earned through touch or memory. A small but telling detail appears in several underground living accounts. Some people reported counting heartbeats or to estimate how long they had been resting. Others measured time by the number of times they turned over. Darkness forced creativity. You become aware of how much modern life relies on visual cues to structure thought. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about whether prolonged exposure to complete darkness altered sleep patterns long term. Some evidence suggests deeper, longer sleep cycles. Other interpretations argue that the effect was temporary fading once people returned to surface light. Either way, darkness clearly reshaped how rest was experienced. You feel that reshaping beginning now. Without visual input, your mind slows its scanning. There is nothing to check, nothing to watch. Thoughts drift more freely, no longer tethered to sight. Your ears sharpen, briefly compensating. Then they too relax. Sound has already been dampened by the earth. Darkness completes the effect. The world feels smaller, but also safer. Fewer inputs mean fewer decisions. You think about children growing up in spaces like this. How quickly they must have adapted to darkness that did not signal fear but normalcy. Adults often struggled longer. They carried expectations shaped by open skies and firelit rooms. Children accepted what was present. An unusual habit recorded in some communities involved deliberately spending short periods in total darkness before sleep. Lamps were extinguished early, allowing eyes and minds to adjust gradually. People believed this reduced nighttime restlessness. Whether this belief was scientifically grounded remains uncertain, but the practice persisted. You let your hands rest on the ground beside you, fingers lightly touching soil. Touch becomes your anchor. The texture tells you where you are. It reassures you that space still exists, even if you cannot see it. Your breathing grows slower again. Darkness removes the temptation to move. There is no reason to adjust your position unless something feels wrong. Nothing does. Above ground darkness often brings unease. It hides threats. It limits awareness. Down here, darkness feels neutral. It hides everything equally. No shadow moves because there is no light to cast it. That uniformity feels oddly fair. Records from long winters underground suggest that people stopped associating darkness with danger after only a few nights. Instead, danger was linked to changes in air sound or moisture. Vision lost its priority. Other senses took over. You notice how the thoughts become less linear. Without visual reminders, memories and ideas drift in and out without order. This could feel unsettling, but tonight it feels gentle. The darkness does not push. It waits. You consider how modern bedrooms are full of light even at night. Digital clocks, streak glow reflections. Here nothing interrupts the dark. Sleep is not delayed by stimulation. It arrives when the body is ready. Your eyelids feel heavy though. Closing them changes nothing. The darkness remains exactly the same. That sameness is comforting. It does not demand attention. Somewhere above the storm continues. Snow falls, wind presses. None of it reaches your eyes. The underground has severed that connection completely. You are not watching winter anymore. You are letting it happen without you. You settle deeper into the bedding, trusting your body to signal if something needs attention. Darkness holds you gently without commentary. In this space without light, rest feels less like surrender and more like alignment. You're not retreating from the world. You are stepping out of its glare for a while. The darkness remains steady, patient and complete as you drift closer to sleep, guided not by sight but by the quiet certainty that nothing needs to change right now. Cold behaves differently underground. You notice this not as a dramatic realization, but as a quiet adjustment in expectation. Above ground, cold announces itself with sharp edges. It bites exposed skin, it rides on wind, changes direction suddenly and without apology. Down here, cold arrives slowly, almost politely, as if asking whether it is allowed to stay. You sense it first at the margins of your body, the tips of your toes, the outer edges of your ears. It does not rush inward. It waits testing. As long as you remain still, warmth holds its ground. The cold seems to understand boundaries here. This is something people learned long before they had language for it. Underground spaces soften temperature extremes. They rarely feel truly warm in winter, but they also rarely feel dangerously cold. That middle ground was enough. It meant survival without constant effort. You shift one foot slightly and feel the coolness respond immediately. It slips closer, curious. When you stop moving, it retreats again. The exchange feels almost convivial. Action invites cold, stillness keeps it at a distance. Your mind files this way quickly, do less, stay put, let the earth do what it does best. There is an odd note tucked into a few winter accounts that mention people waking briefly at night to check if they were too warm. It sounds strange until you feel it yourself. Underground warmth does not fade the way surface heat does. It lingers. Too much insulation, too many layers, and the body overheats quietly. People learn to moderate not just against cold, but against excess warmth. You adjust a blanket with care, then leave it alone. That balance feels right. Not cozy in a modern sense, but stable, predictable. Some early observers struggled to explain this experience to those who had never slept below ground. They wrote about nights that felt unchanged from dusk to dawn, even as blizzards came and went above. Readers often assumed exaggeration. But you understand now. Cold underground lacks drama. It does not perform. You breathe in and notice how the air itself feels less aggressive. Above ground, cold air strips heat quickly. It moves. It replaces itself constantly. Here the air rests. It stays where it is. It warms slightly with each breath and does not hurry away. You remember how earlier cold felt like an opponent, something to brace against. Down here it feels more like a condition, present, manageable, rarely urgent. An unusual habit mentioned in a few communities involved leaving a hand or foot uncovered for short periods just to confirm the cold had not intensified. It was not masochism, it was reassurance. If the cold stayed mild, everything else was working as intended. You try something similar without thinking. You let one hand rest outside the bedding. The coolness is noticeable but not painful. It does not deepen. After a while you tuck your hand back in. Warmth returns easily. That ease matters. It tells you reserves exist. Your thoughts drift to people above ground dealing with the same storm. How they woke to cold floors. How they felt drafts creep into every corner. how sleep required constant repositioning, underground cold does not chase you. It waits to be invited. There are different interpretations of why this feels so reassuring. Some point to physics, others to psychology. The environment is less variable. The mind responds by lowering its guard. Whatever the explanation, the effect is undeniable. Your body stops scanning for danger. You realize you have not shivered once, not even lightly. Earlier shivering felt inevitable. Now it seems unnecessary. The underground has changed the rules. Time passes without markers. Cold remains steady. That steadiness becomes a kind of background hum barely noticeable. It does not fluctuate enough to demand attention. You listen again for the storm. Its presence is faint, distant, almost theoretical. The cold you feel is not the storm itself, but the season. Winter distilled into something manageable. Your breathing slows further. Muscles stay loose, you do not brace. There's nothing to brace against. As you lie there, you understand that this is why people trusted the ground. Not because it eliminated cold, but because it made cold predictable. Predictability is what allows rest. You settle deeper into that predictability. The cold remains where it is. The warmth stays with you. Neither tries to take more than its share. Above ground, winter continues to perform. Down here, it has been reduced to a quiet presence, acknowledged and contained. You let your body accept that this being will hold through the night. That acceptance is what finally allows sleep to come unhurried and uninterrupted, while the storm spends itself somewhere far above your head. You become aware of other people, not through sound or sight, but through warmth. It drifts toward you subtly, not as a wave, but as a soft shift in the air. Someone nearby exhales. The space holds it. Their presence registers as a gentle thickening, like the room itself has leaned a little closer. Sleeping underground changes how closeness feels. Above ground distance offers comfort. Personal space is something you defend. Down here, closeness becomes practical. Bodies share heat whether they intend to or not. You stop thinking of it as crowding and start thinking of it as cooperation. You adjust your position slightly to accommodate the shared space. It does not feel awkward for long. The ground has already decided how much room there is. Everyone adapts that reality. Elbows find new angles. Knees settle where they fit. After a while, these adjustments stop feeling like compromises and start feeling like design. Historical winter shelters were rarely solitary. Families slept together. Workers rotated shifts. Travellers shared dugouts when storms made movement impossible. This was not always a choice driven by community spirit. It was driven by physics. More bodies meant more retained warmth. Empty space was wasted space. You notice how breathing patterns begin to align. Not consciously, it just happens. Inhale, exhale, the rhythm settles into something shared. The underground seems to encourage this synchronization. Sound is muffled, movement is imitated, stillness spreads easily. There is a small but telling observation recorded in several winter accounts. People often mentioned sleeping better in shared underground spaces than alone. The presence of others reduced anxiety. It also stabilized temperature. A single body loses heat faster. Many bodies create a steady baseline. You think about how modern sleep often emphasizes isolation. Separate rooms, separate beds, silence enforced by walls and distance. Underground, that separation is impractical. Privacy exists, but it is redefined, becomes quieter, less visual, more about respect than distance. A whispered cough reaches you. It sounds closer than it is. Sound does not travel far here, but it also does not escape easily. The cough settles into the space, then disappears. No one reacts. It is not alarming. It is simply information. You realize how quickly you stop monitoring others. At first, every movement felt significant. Now only changes matter. Familiar sounds fade into the background. This selective attention conserves energy. It allows rest. Some communities develop small rituals to manage shared sleeping. People arrange themselves by age or by warmth tolerance. Children often slept in the centre buffered by adults. Elders were placed where air moved least. These arrangements were not sentimental. They were tested solutions refined over many winters. You feel the benefit of this without needing to understand it fully. The air around you feels warmer than it did earlier. Not by much, but enough to notice. The underground is no longer just holding your heat, it is redistributing it. There are differing interpretations of how this closeness affected social bonds. Some suggest it strengthened community. Others believe it simply normalized proximity without necessarily increasing emotional connection. Both ideas can be true. Survival often creates habits that outlast the conditions that produced them. You notice how movement becomes more deliberate. You do not want to disturb the shared balance. A sudden shift would send cool air moving. It would ripple outward. Everyone understands this without discussion. Stillness becomes a shared agreement. An unusual practice mentioned in a few accounts involved rotating positions during long winters. People would change sleeping spots every few nights to balance comfort and exposure. No one claimed a permanent best place. Fairness mattered, but so did adaptability. You consider how this environment reshapes awareness of others. You cannot ignore them. You also do not need to watch them. Their presence is constant and unobtrusive. It becomes part of the shelter itself. Your body responds positively. Muscles stay relaxed. The need to guard space fades. You're not alone, and that feels reassuring rather than threatening. The storm above continues. Wind presses down, snow piles higher. Underground, those forces are diffused through layers of soil and shared warmth. The shelter feels fuller now, more alive. You drift towards sleep, aware of the quiet collaboration happening around you. Breath, heat, stillness, all circulating gently within the same confined space. No one directs it. It simply works. As your thoughts slow, the presence of others becomes less distinct. Warmth blends. Air settles. The underground turns many bodies into one steady system, holding back the cold together, while winter exhausts itself above. Objects take on new weight underground, not physically heavier, but more important. Above ground, you are surrounded by things that promise convenience. Extra blankets, spare tools, items you might need but probably will not. Down here, every object earns its place by being useful tonight. You take inventory without meaning to. Bedding, a small container of water, something to eat if the night stretches long. A light source kept close but unused. Nothing feels excessive. Nothing feels optional. The underground strips possessions down to their purpose. People who lived this way learned quickly which tools mattered and which ones did not. Items that served more than one function were favoured. A thick cloak doubled as bedding. A wooden box became a seat, a table, and storage. Even tools meant for work found nighttime roles anchoring door coverings, or weighing down fabric to stop drafts. You notice how reachable everything is. Nothing sits far away. Distance underground is inconvenient. If something cannot be reached easily in the dark, it is reconsidered. Layout matters more than ownership. There is a practical truth recorded in many winter survival accounts. The most valued objects were often the simplest. Knives, needles, containers. Items that could be repaired mattered more than items that could not. When storms trapped people underground for days, resilience beat novelty every time. You shift slightly and brush against a small bundle beside you. The texture tells you what it is before you think about it. Familiarity replaces sight. You know where things are because you place them deliberately. That intentionality feels calming. A curious detail appears in several personal letters. People sometimes wrote about missing objects they did not actually need. Books they could not read in the dark. Decorative items left behind. These absences were noticed, then accepted. Underground living taught people to distinguish between comfort and reassurance. You consider how modern life blurs that line constantly. Here reassurance comes from readiness. Knowing that everything you might need is within arm's reach allows the mind to rest. The storm above shifts again. You feel it as a dull vibration. No one moves. No one reaches for tools. That restraint tells you something. The tools are for when conditions change, not for reacting to every reminder that winter exists. Some groups developed small nighttime rituals involving tools, a final check of the entrance, a quick touch to confirm the light was still there. Not because it would be used, but because its presence mattered. These gestures signalled readiness without inviting action. You find yourself doing something similar. Your hand drifts toward the lamp, stops short, then rests again. You know it is there. That is enough. There are different ways to interpret this reliance on objects. Some see it as vulnerability, others as clarity. When needs are limited, solutions become obvious. The underground simplifies decision-making in a way few environments can. You notice how little you want to move now. Everything you require is close. There is no reason to adjust. That sense of completeness encourages stillness, and stillness preserves warmth. Your breathing remains slow and even, the air feels stable. Nothing smells wrong, nothing sounds urgent. The presence of the right tools arranged thoughtfully has removed the need for vigilance. You think briefly about people above ground fumbling in the dark for items scattered across rooms. How distance becomes an obstacle when cold drains dexterity. Down here, preparation replaces scrambling. A small noise reaches you. Someone adjusting bedding. A tool shifts slightly wood against earth. The sound settles quickly. Nothing else follows. The space returns to quiet. You drift closer to sleep, aware that survival here is not dramatic. It is methodical. It is about choosing correctly long before the storm arrives, then trusting those choices enough to rest. The tools around you do not promise safety. They support it. The real work is already done by the earth, by stillness, by shared warmth. You let your awareness of objects fade. They remain where they are, ready but unobtrusive. The underground has reduced the world to what matters tonight, and that reduction feels like relief. As sleep approaches, the storm above continues its long performance. Down here, surrounded by the right things in the right places, you are free to ignore it and rest. You stop expecting to see fire. That realization arrives quietly without certain ceremony, sometime between one breath and the next. Above ground warmth almost always announces itself with light. Flames flicker, coals glow, shadows dance on walls. Underground warmth has learned to live without spectacle. The heat you feel now does not radiate from a single source. It does not pulse or flare. It exists evenly spread through the ground, the air, the bodies around you. It feels less like something being produced and more like something being maintained. This takes some mental adjustment. You are used to associating safety with visible effort. A fire burning means someone is working to keep the cold away. Here there is no such reassurance. Nothing crackles. Nothing ghosted glows, yet you are warmer than you expected to be. People who slept underground during winter often noted this absence. Fires were used earlier in the evening, sometimes only briefly. Once the space was dry and the air settled, flames became unnecessary or even undesirable. Too much heat created condensation. Condensation led to dampness. Dampness invited cold back in faster than fire could chase it away. You feel that balance now. The warmth around you is gentle and consistent. It does not dry your throat. It does not make the air feel thin. It simply exists, held in place by soil and stillness. You imagine how strange this would have seemed at first. Trusting warmth you cannot see. Letting go of the instinct to feed a fire through the night. That instinct was powerful. Fire was control. Fire was reassurance. Underground control shifts to design rather than action. Your body responds positively. Muscles stay loose. Skin feels comfortably warm without being flushed. There is no sharp contrast between hot and cold zones. Everything sits in a narrow range that the body likes. An odd practice surfaces in a few winter recollections. Some people deliberately extinguished fires earlier than necessary just to confirm the space could hold warmth on its own. It was a test, but also a lesson. Once past, it built confidence that lasted the rest of the season. You realize that confidence has settled into you as well. You are no longer waiting for cold to rush back in the moment. Warmth is no longer fed. You trust the earth to hold what it has already absorbed. The air feels slightly heavier near the ground. Heat settles low. You arranged yourself accordingly without thinking about it. Feet tucked, core protected. This positioning was learned quickly by anyone who slept this way. Heat rises above ground. Underground, it stays close. There are different ways people explain this experience. Some spoke about the ground as if it were alive, sharing warmth generously. Others described it in practical terms, noting how packed soil slowed heat loss. The explanation mattered less than the result. Nights were survivable without constant effort. You listen for sounds of fire out of habit. There are none. The quiet feels complete without it. That absence becomes reassuring rather than unsettling. Nothing needs attention right now. Your breathing stays slow. Warm air fills your lungs and lingers briefly before leaving. Each breath contributes to the shared warmth rather than stealing from it. That exchange feels fair. You think about how much work above ground goes into maintaining heat. Waking to stoke embers, feeding flames through the night, risking sparks and smoke. Underground, the work front loads itself. Preparation replaces vigilance. There is a subtle psychological shift that comes with this. Without firelight, nights feel less segmented. There is no moment where the fire dims and sleep must take over. The transition is smoother. Warmth does not signal bedtime. Tiredness does. You notice how darkness and warmth reinforce each other. Without light, you are less tempted to stay awake. Without fire, there is no focal point pulling your attention. The environment gently insists on rest. Some people found this unsettling at first. Without the companionship of flames, nights felt too quiet, too still. Others found it freeing. There was nothing to watch, nothing to tend. Sleep could arrive without negotiation. You feel yourself drifting in that direction now. The warmth does not increase or decrease. It remains steady, reliable. That steadiness is what allows your mind to loosen its grip. Your thoughts slow further. They wander without urgency. You are not waiting for the fire to die down. It is already gone and nothing bad has happened. Above ground, the storm continues to spend its energy. Wind pushes, snow piles higher. All of that effort results in noise and motion. Down here, warmth exists without drama. It does not care what the storm is doing. You realize that this is one of the underground's quiet gifts. It removes spectacle from survival. What remains is efficiency, stability, enough. Your body responds by settling deeper into the bedding. Heat stays where it belongs. Cold does not intrude. There is nothing to adjust, nothing to check. 2. Sleep approaches naturally unprompted by flickering light or fading embers. The earth holds warmth for you without asking for attention in return. As you drift closer to rest, you understand why people trusted this kind of shelter. Not because it felt luxurious, but because it worked quietly night after night without demanding constant proof. You let that understanding carry you forward into sleep held by warmth you cannot see, protected by soil. You no longer need to question while winter exhausts itself somewhere far above. You begin to recognize which sounds matter and which ones do not. This skill develops quietly without instruction. At first, everything felt important. Every faint noise demanded interpretation. Now, only changes break through your calm. The underground teaches this lesson patiently. It presents you with a steady baseline of quiet and asks you to notice deviations rather than constant motion. The difference is subtle but powerful. Instead of listening for danger, you listen for shifts. A soft settling sound reaches you. Earth adjusting, wood responding to pressure. It feels familiar, almost reassuring. You have heard versions of this sound before and nothing followed. Your body catalogues it as normal. Above ground, people often slept lightly during storms, waking at every creak or gust. Underground sleepers learned to rest through those same events. Not because they were careless, but because the shelter filtered information more intelligently. Most noises never reached you at all. Those that did arrive softened and delayed. You notice how this changes your posture. Earlier, your muscles stayed ready to react. Now they remain loose. The need to spring into action fades when the environment stops shouting warnings. There's a small pattern mentioned in winter records from different regions. People often wrote about becoming excellent judges of sound direction underground. They could tell whether a noise came from above from the entrance or from within the shelter itself. That awareness replaced anxiety. Knowing where a sound came from mattered more than knowing what caused it. You test this awareness now. A faint scrape reaches you barely audible. You identify it quickly as someone shifting nearby. It requires no response. Your mind notes it and moves on. Listening becomes selective rather than constant. This conserves energy. It also deepens rest. The underground encourages efficiency not just in heat retention but in attention. An unusual detail appears in a few recollections. Some people reported that they slept better during the loudest storms. Heavy snowfall and strong wind created such a uniform blanket of pressure that fewer distinct sounds broke through. Quiet storms were more unsettling than loud ones. Silence above ground left more room for imagination. You consider this as the storm outside continues. Its presence feels broad rather than sharp. No sudden impacts, no erratic noises, just a steady force pressing down evenly. That uniformity feels safe. Your ears remain alert without being tense. This balance feels new. You are listening but not waiting. The difference is subtle but profound. There are different explanations for how people learn this skill. Some suggest it was simple adaptation. Others believe it required deliberate effort at first. Regardless, the result was the same. Underground sleepers became skilled at filtering information. You realize you are doing this now without thinking about it. Sounds that once would have raised your pulse now pass through your awareness without lingering. Only unfamiliar or abrupt changes would draw your attention. You breathe slowly, letting the quiet settle further. The air feels steady. Nothing smells off, no sudden drafts touch your skin. These cues matter more than noise alone. Above-ground danger often announces itself audibly. Branches snap, roofs groan. Underground danger announces itself through other channels: moisture, air quality, structural shifts. Sound is only one part of the picture. You feel grateful for the simplicity of this moment. Nothing demands interpretation. Nothing asks for action. That absence of demand is what allows your body to sink deeper into rest. A low vibration passes through the ground, wind gusting strongly above. The vibration arrives dulled, spread out almost gentle. It does not feel like a threat. It feels like weather doing what weather does. Your thoughts drift briefly to those above ground, bracing against the same gust. Their sleep fractured by noise and motion. Down here, the gust becomes a minor background event. You notice how this environment encourages trust. Not blind trust, but earned trust. Each uneventful night reinforces the belief that the shelter will continue to do its job. Some underground dwellers developed a habit of briefly waking to listen before falling back asleep. It was not anxiety, it was confirmation. A quick check that everything sounded as it should. Once confirmed, sleep returned easily. You experience something similar. Your awareness surfaces briefly, then settles again. Everything sounds right. The quiet is consistent, and no changes need attention. This selective listening becomes part of your rest. It allows you to remain safe without sacrificing sleep, a balance many environments struggle to provide. As the night deepens, the storm above gradually loses intensity. You sense this not through distinct sounds, but through a general easing of pressure. The underground communicates this information slowly without urgency. Your breathing remains even. Your body stays warm. Your mind stays calm. All signs point to safety. You let yourself drift further, trusting that any important sound will reach you clearly enough to matter. Everything else can remain background noise, filtered and softened by earth and design. In this, quiet listening becomes less about vigilance and more about harmony. You're not guarding against the night. You're resting within it. The underground holds steady. The storm spends itself. You continue sleeping confident that if something truly needs your attention, it will arrive clearly, unmistakably, and in time. Your body begins to notice things before your mind does. This happens gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. A faint ache in the knees, a subtle stiffness in the fingers. These sensations do not feel like problems. They feel like messages, quiet signals arriving ahead of any obvious change. Underground, your body becomes an instrument. Without windows or weather reports, it picks up patterns on its own. Pressure shifts register in joints. Drops in temperature announce themselves through skin before they reach awareness. You start trusting these signals because they will keep proving accurate. You flex your toes slightly and feel how easily they respond. Not numb, not sluggish. That tells you something. The cold has not deepened. If it had, your feet would know first. They always do. People who spent long winters sleeping this way often mentioned that they stopped checking the weather outside altogether. They did not need to. Their bodies told them what kind of night it was. Sharp aches meant falling temperatures. A dull heaviness suggested snow accumulating. Ease and looseness meant the storm was passing or had settled into something steady. You notice a faint pressure behind your eyes, not unpleasant, just present. It reminds you of long days before snowfall when the air thickens and sounds travel differently. That pressure is easing now. Whatever the storm brought with it earlier is slowly letting go. Your skin feels warm where it touches the ground, cooler where it meets air. That contrast remains consistent. Consistency matters more than comfort. Sudden changes are what signal trouble? Nothing is changing quickly right now. An odd habit appears in some winter recollections. People would wake briefly, stretch their fingers and toes, then settle back down without opening their eyes. This was not restlessness, it was assessment. A quick check that circulation remained good. That habit fades once trust builds. You realize you have already performed this check without noticing. Your body did it for you. Fingers moved, toes flexed, everything responded, message received, no action required. There are different ideas about why the body becomes so attuned in environments like this. Some believe reduced sensory input sharpens internal awareness. Others suggest that survival situations simply force attention inward. Either way, the result is the same. You feel more connected to your physical state than you do in most modern settings. Above ground, discomfort often blends into background noise. Chairs are hard, floors are cold, drafts come and go. Underground, every sensation feels deliberate. If something feels wrong, it likely is. That clarity reduces anxiety rather than increasing it. You shift your shoulders slightly and feel a pleasant release. Muscles that worked earlier today are finally letting go. Warmth and stillness encourage this release. There is no reason to hold tension when nothing is demanding movement. Your breathing deepens, again syncing with the calm signals your body is sending. Heartbeat steady, skin warm, joints loose. These are good signs. The night is behaving. You think briefly about how disconnected modern life can feel from physical signals. Clocks tell you when to sleep. Alarms tell you when to wake. Thermostats adjust temperature automatically. Underground, your body reclaims that role. It becomes the primary sensor. There is a quiet confidence in this. You do not feel primitive or vulnerable. You feel informed. Your body is participating in your survival rather than being carried along by it. Another small sensation surfaces, a faint warmth spreading along your lower back. That tells you heat has settled properly. The ground is holding what it absorbed earlier. This is exactly what you want. You remember how earlier in the night you were alert, evaluating every detail. That vigilance has veered. In its place is something calmer, awareness without urgency. Above ground, storms often keep people awake not just because of noise, but because of uncertainty. What will the weather do next? Will it get worse? Will it last? Underground uncertainty shrinks. The environment changes slowly enough for the body to stay ahead of it. You feel the truth of that now. Nothing in your body is warning you. Nothing is asking for attention. That silence is meaningful. Your eyelids grow heavier. Thoughts drift without direction. Sensations soften. Even awareness of your body begins to fade as comfort takes over. Before sleep fully claims you, there is a final check, barely conscious. Everything feels right. Warm enough, supported, calm. The underground has trained your body to read the night accurately, to listen inward rather than outward. That skill allows you to rest deeply, trusting that if something changes, your body will tell you long before danger arrives. With that trust in place, you let go completely. Sleep settles over you, carried not by exhaustion, but by confidence in the quiet signals that have guided you all night. You are not alone down here, even when you are. The underground has its own quiet population, most of it unseen, most of it uninterested in you. You sense this not as fear, but as awareness. Life continues above and below, whether you acknowledge it or not. A faint scratching sound reaches you, brief and distant. It could be nothing. Earth settling, a fragment of soil shifting its weight. Or it could be something small moving through a space you will never see. The underground does not clarify, it does not feel the need to. You stay still and listen. The sound does not return. Whatever caused it has moved on or never intended to stay long in the first place. Your pulse does not quicken. This is not new information. You already knew the Earth was occupied. People who slept underground often accepted this as a simple fact. Burrowing animals, insects, and unseen creatures had been here long before humans arrived. Shelters were built with that knowledge in mind. Thick walls, packed floors, minimal openings, not to eliminate life, but to create boundaries. You think about how different this feels from above ground. Their animals announce themselves. Hooves, wings, howls carried on the wind. Underground presence is quieter. It brushes past rather than confronting you directly. A curious habit appears in some long winter recollections. People sometimes place small offerings of food just outside entrances, not out of superstition exactly, but practicality. If animals had an easier option elsewhere, they were less likely to investigate the shelter itself. Whether this actually worked is unclear, but the practice persisted. You listen again more out of curiosity than concern. Nothing. The underground has settled back into stillness. Your body remains relaxed. That tells you something important. Instinct is not raising alarms. If there were real danger, your muscles would know before your thoughts did. They remain loose. Breath stays slow. Above ground, animals respond dramatically to storms. Birds vanish, herds shift, predators move differently. Underground, those movements become background events. You're buffered not just from weather, but from the chaos it creates in other lives. There are different ways people explain the relative calm below ground during storms. Some believed animals avoided earth shelters instinctively. Others noticed that animals simply followed their own needs and paths, which rarely intersected with human sleeping spaces when conditions were harsh. The result felt the same either way. Nights passed undisturbed more often than not. You remember earlier concerns you had before settling in? Thoughts of collapse, of intrusion, of being too enclosed. None of those fears feel immediate now. Experience has replaced imagination. A faint warmth brushes your leg. It takes you a moment to realize it is not an animal at all, but shared heat drifting from another sleeper nearby. You almost laugh at the comparison. Your senses are tuned finely enough now that small changes stand out. The underground teaches discrimination. Not every sensation deserves interpretation. Not every sound requires a story. Some things simply exist and pass. You imagine a mouse running through a tunnel far beyond your reach, unaware of you entirely. Its night continues according to its own logic. Your presence does not interrupt it. That thought feels strangely reassuring. You're not at the center of this environment. You're simply passing through it. Some people found this unsettling at first, the idea that the shelter was part of a larger living system rather than an isolated bubble. Others found comfort in it. Life continuing nearby meant the environment was stable enough to support it. You feel that stability now. The air remains steady, the ground holds firm. Nothing presses closer, nothing withdraws suddenly. You close your eyes again, knowing it changes nothing about the darkness. Awareness drifts inward. The underground fades into sensation rather than concept. If something moves nearby again, it will announce itself gently, if at all. If it does not, you will sleep through the night without knowing how many lives passed quietly around you. That thought does not disturb you. It settles into place alongside everything else you have learned tonight. The underground is not empty. It is simply calm. As sleep deepens, the world above and below continues on its separate paths. Storms move, animals adapt, Earth holds. You remain where you are, warm enough, protected enough, and no longer interested in cataloguing what you cannot see. The underground has proven itself steady. That is all you need to know. Your breathing slows, thoughts soften, awareness thins. Whatever else shares this space will keep to its own rhythm. You keep to yours. Both pass the night without incident, tucked beneath layers of soil, while winter gradually loosens its grip overhead. Hunger does not announce itself loudly underground. It arrives as a gentle suggestion rather than a demand, a quiet awareness in the stomach, a faint thought that drifts through your mind and then moves on. You notice it, acknowledge it, and decide whether it deserves attention right now. Earlier in the evening, food mattered more. Calories were insurance. You ate not because you were starving, but because winter encourages preparation. Down here, digestion feels slower, steadier. The body is not burning energy, fighting wind or shivering. What you consume lingers, releasing warmth gradually. You become aware of how closely food and sleep are linked in this space. Too little food and rest becomes shallow. Too much and sleep turns restless. People who lived this way learned that balance through repetition rather than instruction. Meals became quieter in winter, simpler, timed carefully so the body could do its work without interruption. You feel that timing now. Your stomach is calm, not full, not empty, just settled. That comfort spreads upward, easing the chest, relaxing the throat. It becomes easier to breathe deeply when digestion is not demanding attention. Some winter dwellers preferred warm, dense foods before sleeping underground. Stews, porridge, anything that stayed warm inside the body longer than the fire itself. Others relied on small, frequent portions, believing that steady intake supported steady warmth. Both approaches existed side by side, shaped by habit and availability rather than strict rules. You think about how modern advice around food and sleep often feels rigid. Eat this, avoid that. Underground feedback was immediate and personal. If sleep suffered, adjustments were made the next night. Bodies taught their own lessons. A small, almost humorous detail appears in a few personal winter notes. People sometimes dreamed about food more often underground, even when they were not hungry. Familiar meals, shared tables. The mind filled the quiet with memories of warmth and abundance. Those dreams were not distressing. They felt comforting, like reminders of continuity. You shift slightly and feel no discomfort. That confirms what you already sensed. The balance is right, nothing presses, nothing churns. The air carries no strong food smells now. Earlier it might have. Cooking scents lingered longer underground, clinging to walls and bedding. Over time, people adjusted how and when they prepared food to avoid heavy odours at night. A clean, neutral air made sleep deeper. You realise how many small choices led to this calm moment. When to eat, what to eat, how much. None of it feels deliberate now, but each decision shaped the night. Your thoughts drift to those above ground, eating hurriedly to keep warm, chewing with gloves half on, swallowing quickly before food cooled. Underground meals could be slower, more intentional. Warmth stayed long enough to allow it. There is no urge to reach for food now. That absence of desire feels as important as hunger itself. It means the body is content. Contentment is a powerful signal in winter. Some people believe that sleeping underground changed appetite over time. They noticed cravings shifting toward heavier foods in early winter, then easing as routines stabilized. Whether this was psychological or physiological was never clear. What mattered was that people learned to listen and adjust. You listen now. Nothing asks for attention. Your stomach rests quietly, doing its work without complaint. That silence allows sleep to deepen rather than fragment. You think briefly about water. A small sip earlier, enough to prevent dryness without inviting restlessness. That too was learned through experience. Too much meant waking, too little meant discomfort. Balance again. The underground encourages moderation. Extremes stand out quickly. Gentle choices blend into the background and disappear. Your breathing remains slow. The body directs energy toward maintenance rather than correction. Heat stays steady. Muscles remain loose. Food has done its job for the night. It has provided warmth, stability, and a sense of readiness without demanding more. That quiet cooperation feels satisfying. As sleep approaches, the memories of meals drift through your mind. Not specific dishes, but the feeling of sitting close to others, sharing warmth, eating slowly while storms pressed against the world outside. Those memories feel close to night, even if they are not your own. The underground blurs personal history. It invites shared experiences across time. People slept this way, ate this way, rested this way long before you arrived. You settle deeper, grateful that nothing in your body is pulling you back toward wakefulness. Hunger is quiet. Digestion is calm. Warmth is steady. Above ground, winter continues to demand fuel. Fires need feeding. Bodies burn energy quickly. Down here, the night unfolds at a slower pace. You let your awareness of food fade, knowing it will return when needed. For now, sleep takes priority. Your body agrees, thoughts soften, sensations dim. Nourished enough, warm enough, and undisturbed, you drift into deeper rest, held by the quiet cooperation between earth, body, and the simple choices that made this night possible. Moisture announces itself quietly underground if you know how to listen for it. It does not drip at first, it does not flood or rush. It begins as a subtle change in how the air feels against your skin, a faint coolness that does not belong to temperature alone, a softness in fabric that should feel dry. You notice none of this immediately. That is part of the danger. Moisture does not demand attention the way cold does. It waits. It settles. It works slowly, undoing comfort a little at a time. Earlier in the evening, the space felt perfectly balanced. Air neither too dry nor too heavy. Now there is the slightest suggestion of dampness, not enough to alarm you, just enough to be aware of. The underground teaches awareness without panic. You shift your hand across the bedding and feel that it is still dry where it matters most. That tells you the moisture is under control, it is present but contained. Condensation forms when warmth meets cold surfaces. Underground, those surfaces are everywhere. Walls, ceiling, floor. Managing moisture is less about eliminating it and more about preventing accumulation. People who slept underground during long winters learned this lesson quickly. Warmth alone was not enough. Dry warmth mattered. A space could be warm and still dangerous if dampness took hold. Wet air pulled heat from the body faster. Wet bedding made sleep shallow and restless. You breathe slowly and notice that the air still feels breathable, not heavy. That is reassuring. Moisture has not crossed any thresholds yet. There was a small habit many people adopted without much discussion. They paid attention to how their breath behaved in the dark. If it felt like it lingered too thickly in one place, adjustments were made the next day. A new vent, a wider entrance covering, a slight change in where fires were built earlier in the evening. You think about how much of this knowledge was tactile rather than verbal. People did not always explain what they were doing, they simply responded to how the space felt. That responsiveness kept shelters livable through months of snow. You run your fingers along the wall beside you. It feels cool but not wet. That distinction matters. Coolness is expected. Moisture is a problem. The wall passes the test. Your body relaxes again. Moisture remains a background concern rather than an active threat. That is the best outcome. Underground living rarely eliminated problems entirely. It managed them into something tolerable. There are different ideas about how often moisture caused serious trouble in winter shelters. Some accounts describe constant struggle. Others barely mention it. Conditions varied widely. Soil type, construction quality, climate, luck, experience. The same shelter could behave differently from one winter to the next. You realize how much tonight has depended on preparation you did not witness. Someone chose this location carefully. Someone shaped the walls with drainage in mind. Someone learned from earlier mistakes. You're benefiting from that accumulated knowledge now. A faint coolness brushes your cheek. It is not unpleasant. It is simply information. Air is circulating, moisture is not trapped. That circulation keeps the balance intact. You think about how modern buildings hide moisture problems behind walls and ceilings. Issues grow unnoticed until damage is severe. Underground, nothing hides for long. The environment speaks directly through sensation. Your breathing remains steady. The air does not feel sticky or heavy. That tells you sleep will not be interrupted by discomfort. You adjust your position slightly, not to chase warmth, but to ensure air can move around you. That small adjustment feels instinctive now. The underground has taught you to cooperate rather than react. Moisture remains present but restrained. It stays where it belongs, part of the environment rather than a threat. Above ground, snow melts and freezes. Ice forms and breaks. Water moves constantly through cycles. Down here, moisture exists in slower rhythms. It accumulates gradually. It recedes gradually. Everything takes time. You let your awareness of it soften. You do not ignore it. You simply stop monitoring it actively. That balance is key. Too much attention breeds anxiety. Too little invites problem. The space feels stable enough to rest. Walls cool, air moving gently, bedding dry, body warm. You close your eyes again, knowing the darkness does not change. Moisture has not claimed the night. It has been acknowledged and contained. As sleep approaches, you trust that if the balance shifts, your body will notice. For now, nothing demands action. The underground continues its quiet negotiation with warmth, cold and air. You are part of that system now, breathing, steadily contributing just enough heat without overwhelming it. With moisture held in check and comfort preserved, you drift deeper into rest while winter continues its long work above, unaware that below the surface balance has been carefully and successfully maintained. At some point, without marking the moment, the space stops feeling like a compromise. Earlier, the underground asked things of you. It asked you to accept low ceilings, darkness, closeness, restraint. Now it begins to offer something back, a sense of being held rather than confined. You notice this shift not through thought, but through the body. The tightness you carried when you first came down here is gone. Shoulders rest heavier. Breathing deepens without instruction. Your jaw no longer presses shut. These are small changes, but together they signal a larger one. Your mind has stopped treating the earth above you as a threat. Above ground enclosure often means danger, trapped air, limited exits, collapse. Underground, those fears arrive early and loudly, then fade if nothing confirms them. Night after night, the walls remain where they are. The ceiling does not sag, the ground does not move. Reliability reshapes expectation. You think about how quickly humans learn from repetition. One safe night is luck. 2 nights invite caution. A week begins to feel like proof. By now, the underground has delivered consistency. That consistency quiets the imagination. This change has been noticed before. People who lived through long winters below ground often described an early phase of vigilance followed by a deeper calm. At first, sleep came lightly. Later, it came heavily. The shelter did not change. The relationship to it did. You feel that relationship shifting now. The earth no longer feels like something you're hiding inside. It feels like something you are aligned with. Its temperature, its closeness, its pressure. All of it works in your favor as long as you do not fight it. Your thoughts slow in response. Earlier, your mind scanned constantly. Is it too cold, too damp, too quiet, too close? Now those questions arrive less often. When they do, they dissolve quickly. Experience answers them before anxiety can. There is a simple physical reason for part of this calm. The underground reduces variability. Temperature changes slowly. Sound travels poorly. Light does not intrude. The nervous system prefers predictability. It relaxes when the environment stops surprising it. But there is something else happening too, something psychological. Burrowing carries meaning. It signals safety at a deep level. Many animals seek enclosed spaces to rest. Humans do this as well, even in subtle ways. Blankets pulled tight, corners of rooms, shelves turned into reading nooks. The underground is an extreme version of that instinct. You notice how your awareness has narrowed in a pleasant way. The outside world feels distant, almost irrelevant. This is not avoidance. It is prioritization. Tonight, nothing beyond these walls requires your attention. You think briefly about how difficult this would have felt earlier in the season. How the same space might have triggered restlessness or unease. The difference is not the shelter. It is familiarity. The unknown has been replaced by routine. A small memory surfaces of your first night here. How every sound startled you. How you imagined the weight of snow pressing down. How you counted breaths without realizing it. That version of you feels far away now. Some people describe this stage as forgetting the surface, not literally, but emotionally. The sky stopped being a constant reference point. Weather became something abstract. The underground became the primary world, even if only temporarily. You feel that shift beginning. The storm above no longer shapes your thoughts. You're not imagining its progress or its end. You trust that morning will arrive whether you track it or not. Your body rebounds by letting go further. Muscles sink into the bedding. Weight distributes evenly. There is no urge to reposition. Comfort has stabilized. This is where confinement transforms into containment. The walls no longer feel close because they're close. They feel close because they're reliable. They define a space that is yours for the night. You notice how safe thoughts start to wander differently. Not racing, not looping, they drift gently, touching memories, then letting them go. The mind has stopped bracing. There were people who struggled to leave this feeling behind when winter ended. They spoke of missing the certainty. The way nights underground removed choice and replaced it with rhythm. That rhythm could be comforting after months of unpredictability. You understand that appeal now. Life above ground offers freedom, but it also demands constant decisions. Underground, many decisions have already been made. The space decides how warm it will be, how dark, how quiet. Your role is to accept rather than manage. You breathe in and feel the air settle around you. It does not rush away. It does not carry new information. It simply exists. That existence is enough. Your awareness softens further. Thoughts thin. Sensations blur into background comfort. You're no longer evaluating the underground. You're inhabiting it. The storm continues above, but it feels like a separate story happening far away. Down here, the earth holds steady. It has proven itself trustworthy. You allow that trust to deepen. You stop monitoring your body. You stop checking the space. You stop listening for problems that are no longer coming. This is the moment when sleep stops being an effort and becomes an outcome. The underground has done its work not by forcing rest, but by making rest reasonable. As you drift closer to sleep, the sense of being enclosed transforms into something quieter and kinder. You're not buried. You're sheltered. The earth remains above you, firm and unmoving. The space remains balanced. Your body remains calm. Nothing asks anything more of you tonight. You let go, completely resting inside the dark, held by layers of soil and certainty while winter carries on without you. Conversation changes when sound has weight. Underground words feel heavier, as if they must justify their movement through the air. You notice this even now in the pauses between breaths. Silence is not empty here. It is occupied. It does not invite interruption. Earlier voices may have moved more freely. Quiet comments, small reassurances. Now even those have faded. When someone does speak, the sound stays close, settling rather than travelling. It feels respectful, almost careful. You remember how different this is from above-ground nights. Wind carries voices away. Words scatter, lose their shape. Underground speech stays intact. It does not echo dramatically, but it also does not disappear. It lands and waits. People who slept this way learn to speak differently. Not louder, softer, slower. Whispering was not always necessary, but restraint was. A raised voice felt intrusive in a space that held sound so well. You notice how this changes what gets said. Conversations become shorter, more deliberate. Practical matters are handled earlier in the evening. By the time sleep approaches, words feel unnecessary. Silence communicates enough. There is a faint memory of stories told in these spaces. Not long tales meant to entertain, but fragments. A sentence here, a reminder there, words shared without expectation of response. Underground storytelling was not about performance, it was about presence. You imagine children listening, eyes open in the dark, absorbing tone rather than content. The voice mattered more than the story. Calm voices signalled safety. That signal lingered long after the words stopped. You feel that effect now. Even without anyone speaking, the memory of earlier voices stays in the air. It softens the space. It reminds you that others are near, that this silence is shared. Some nights people avoided speaking altogether once bedding was laid out, not out of fear but habit. Silence preserved warmth. It also preserved calm. Words stirred thought. Thought stirred movement. Movement invited cold. You understand that logic now. Silence is efficient. A small sound breaks it. Someone clears their throat. The sound feels closer than it is. It does not startle you. It settles, then fades. The space absorbs it fully. You notice how quickly the underground returns to stillness. There is no lingering echo, no after-image. Sound here is temporary. It does not bounce around looking for attention. This quality encourages restraint. You do not feel the urge to fill the quiet. Above ground, silence often feels like something missing. Underground, it feels complete. There are different reasons people gave for this preference. Some spoke about conserving heat. Others mentioned courtesy. In close quarters, quiet becomes a form of care. It allows everyone to rest without disturbance. You feel that care now even without conscious thought. The stillness feels intentional, shared. Your thoughts slow in response. Without conversation to react to, the mind drifts inward. Memories surface briefly, then dissolve. The lack of external input makes room for rest. You think about how modern spaces rarely allow this kind of quiet. Machines hum, lights buzz. Distant traffic never fully disappears. Underground, those layers are stripped away. What remains is the sound of bodies existing. You listen to your own breathing again. It feels steady, unhurried. You are not syncing it to anyone else now. You are simply breathing. The storm above has quieted further. Or perhaps you have stopped listening for it. The distinction no longer matters. The underground has claimed the night. You realize how rare it is to be in a place where silence feels protective rather than exposing. Here, silence is insulation. It holds warmth and calm in equal measure. Your body responds by sinking deeper. Muscles soften. The urge to speak, to move, to check fades completely. Words have done their work for the night. Anything important has already been said. Everything else can wait until morning. You rest in that understanding. Silence wraps around you like another layer of soil, soft but firm, keeping the outside world at a distance. As sleep deepens, even internal dialogue quiets. Thoughts become impressions rather than sentences. Language loosens its grip. The underground remains still. No voices rise. No sounds demand attention. You drift further into rest, carried not by words but by the absence of them, surrounded by a silence that feels full, shared, and deeply reassuring while winter continues its quiet retreat above. You wake without knowing why. There is no sound to explain it, no clear sensation pulling you from sleep. It feels more like a pause than an awakening, a moment where awareness surfaces briefly and then waits to see if anything follows. Nothing does. You lie still, listening, sensing, checking without effort. The air feels the same, warmth holds. The ground remains firm beneath you. Whatever stirred you has already passed, if it existed at all. This happens more often underground than you might expect. Sleep here is deep, but it is also layered. You drift down, then rise slightly, then sink again. These shallow returns to awareness feel gentle rather than jarring. They do not carry urgency. Above ground, waking in the night often means reacting. Wind rattles something. A branch scrapes. A sound demands explanation. Underground, the absence of new information allows you to remain calm. Waking becomes a neutral event. You listen again, more out of curiosity than concern. The storm is still present, but only as a distant pressure, Like a memory your body has already filed away. It does not feel active anymore. It feels spent. You realize something quietly important. You slept through most of the storm without noticing, not because it was weak, but because it was irrelevant to your immediate world. That realization settles slowly without celebration. People who slept underground during severe winters often remarked on this strange disconnection. Storms that caused damage elsewhere passed almost unnoticed below. Roofs collapsed above ground, roads vanished. Underground sleepers learned about it later, sometimes with surprise. You feel a hint of that surprise now, even before morning. The storm that once felt so imposing no longer commands attention. It has become background context rather than a threat. You adjust your head slightly and notice that the air feels a touch lighter. Not warmer, not colder, just less heavy. That subtle shift tells you something has changed above. Snow may have stopped falling. Wind may have eased. The underground communicates these changes slowly and without detail. You accept that information without needing confirmation. There is no window to check, no sound to analyze. Trust replaces observation. Your body remains relaxed. There is no urge to get up, no compulsion to act. This waking does not ask for movement. It simply reminds you that you are safe enough to notice. Some underground sleepers describe this kind of waking as restful rather than disruptive. A brief moment of awareness followed by an easy return to sleep. It was as if the mind checked in confirmed stability and moved on. You feel that sequence now. Awareness hovers, then begins to drift again. Your breathing stays slow. Muscles do not tense. Nothing pulls you fully back to consciousness. The bedding remains warm. The space remains quiet. You think briefly about those above ground who might be waking repeatedly, reacting to every shift in the storm. Their nights fractured into vigilance and adjustment. Down here, vigilance has been outsourced to design and depth. That thought does not carry judgment, just contrast. Your eyelids feel heavy again. Sleep waits patiently, ready to reclaim you the moment you stop paying attention. You let yourself go, trusting that if the storm truly demanded something of you, it would announce itself clearly. It has not. As you sink back into sleep, the underground continues its steady work buffering, change smoothing extremes, turning dramatic events into faint impression. Above the storm finishes whatever it came to do. Snow settles, wind calms, the world reshapes itself quietly. Below you remain undisturbed, drifting through the last stages of the night, having slept through most of winter's performance without ever needing to watch it. Sleep deepens again, unbroken and calm as the earth holds its position, and the storm becomes just another thing that happened somewhere else. You imagine the people sleeping above ground, not out of concern but curiosity. The thought arrives gently, like a comparison made in passing. You picture them shifting under blankets, responding to drafts, listening for the storm's next move. Their night feels busy by comparison, full of small negotiations. Down here, negotiation has already ended. The Earth decided most things for you hours ago. Temperature, light, sound. The remaining choices are minimal, and that simplicity feels like a gift. You notice how rarely you have moved. Your body found a position early and stayed with it. That alone tells you something important. Comfort underground is not about constant adjustment. It is about finding equilibrium and trusting it to hold. Above ground sleepers often wake to check the weather even without realizing it. A gust rattles something. Snow shifts on a roof. The body responds before the mind does. Underground, that feedback loop is interrupted. The environment does not keep asking for reassurance. You think about how that interruption changes rest. Sleep becomes less fragile. It does not fracture at every stimulus. It stretches deep and unbroken, shaped by long periods of stillness rather than brief collapses into exhaustion. A memory surfaces of early settlers describing how surprised they were to wake rested after nights underground. They expected discomfort. Instead, they found themselves waking without the usual aches and fatigue that followed storm nights above ground. The ground had done more work than they realized. You feel that benefit now. Your joints feel loose. Your muscles remain warm. There is no lingering tension waiting to be worked out in the morning. winter's actually restored something. The contrast sharpens when you imagine morning above ground. Shovels, cold air hitting the face. The slow process of warming fingers before they can function. Down here, waking will be quieter, gradual. The underground does not rush you into the day. Your breathing deepens again as if responding to that thought. There is no need to prepare yet. Morning will arrive on its own terms. Some nights above ground, storms linger just long enough to unsettle sleep without offering any drama in return. Underground, those same storms pass almost anonymously. You may never know how fierce they were until you step back into the open. You find comfort in that distance. It does not make you careless. It makes you rested. There is a difference. Your thoughts drift toward the idea of protection. Not protection as a barrier, but as moderation. The underground does not stop winter. It filters it. It allows what can be tolerated and keeps out what cannot. That filtering changes your relationship with the season. Winter stops being something to fight. It becomes something happening elsewhere. You realize how much energy that saves. Not just physical energy, but mental energy. Fear consumes resources. Anticipation consumes attention. Underground, both are reduced to manageable levels. You feel a quiet appreciation for the people who figured this out long ago. Not through theory, but through nights like this. Nights where survival depended on choosing the right place to lie down and trusting it enough to sleep. Your awareness softens further. Thoughts no longer hold shape. They blur into impressions, warmth, weight, stillness. The storm above is almost entirely absent now, either finished or irrelevant. You cannot tell which, and you do not need to. You settle deeper into the bedding, confident that when morning comes it will arrive gently. No sudden brightness, no sharp temperature shift, just a gradual return to awareness. Down here rest feels complete, not stolen in fragments, but earned through alignment with the environment. You allow that completeness to carry you forward, letting sleep deepen once more, content in the knowledge that winter did its worst somewhere above and you remained untouched by most of it. Repetition has quietly changed everything. You did not notice the shift when it happened, because it did not arrive with drama. It arrived through familiarity. Night after night, the same sequence unfolded. You descended, you settled, you rested. Somewhere along the way, fear was replaced by routine. You realize this when you think about how little effort it now takes to prepare for sleep. Earlier in the season, every step felt deliberate. Every choice felt weighted. Now your body moves through the process almost automatically. Bedding arranged, position chosen, stillness found. There is comfort in not having to think. Routine underground does not feel monotonous. It feels stabilizing. In a world where winter disrupts everything above ground, predictability becomes precious. The underground offers it generously. You notice how quickly your body settles now. Earlier it took time to unwind. Muscles held tension. Breath stayed shallow. Tonight relaxation arrives almost immediately. That is not luck. It is training. People who spent entire winters sleeping this way often described how quickly survival tasks turned into habits. The first nights demanded attention. Later nights demanded trust. Once trust took hold, effort decreased. The shelter worked best when it was allowed to do so without interference. You feel that trust now. You do not check the walls. You do not listen for every sound. You do not test the air repeatedly. Those checks have been replaced by confidence built through repetition. The storm above no longer shapes your expectations. It may rage or whisper. Either way, your response remains the same. Settle in, stay still, let the night pass. Your breathing finds its rhythm quickly. In, out, no adjustments, no corrections. The body recognizes this environment and responds accordingly. This routine extends beyond sleep. It influences how you think about comfort. Above-ground comfort often requires constant maintenance. Fires need tending, drafts need blocking. Underground comfort is front-loaded. Once achieved, it sustains itself. You find this deeply restful, not just physically, but mentally. Decision fatigue fades. There is nothing to solve tonight, nothing to optimize, everything is already good enough. You think about how rare that feeling is. Modern life rarely allows conditions to simply remain acceptable without attention. Something always demands adjustment. Here, stability is the default. A quiet satisfaction settles over you. Not excitement, not relief. Just a steady sense that things are as they should be. That feeling encourages deeper rest than novelty ever could. Your body sinks further into the bedding. Weight distributes evenly. Muscles soften completely. You've reached the stage where sleep is not something you try to achieve. It is something that happens while you're not interfering. The underground rewards this non-interference. The less you do, the better it works. That lesson has been reinforced enough times now that your body believes it. You think briefly about the coming mornings, how routine will shape those too, rising slowly, letting the underground release you rather than escaping it. That thought carries no urgency. Morning will arrive when it arrives. The storm above has faded into irrelevance. Even if it has not fully ended, it has lost its ability to command attention. Routine has taken its place as the dominant force. You allow that routine to carry you. Sleep deepens smoothly without interruption, supported by the predictability you have built night after night. In this space, repetition is not dull. It is protective. It creates a rhythm that winter cannot easily disrupt. You rest within that rhythm, confident that the night will unfold as expected, and that expectation itself is what makes rest possible. As awareness drifts away again, the underground holds steady, repeating what it has done every night. Shielding, softening, simplifying. You do nothing, you need to do nothing. The routine has taken over and it knows exactly how to get you through the night. Children adapt faster than adults, and you can feel that truth even if no child is present beside you right now. It shows up in how quickly fear dissolves when the environment proves consistent. Adults arrive underground carrying expectations, comparisons, worries built elsewhere. Children arrive curious, then accept what works. You think about how a child would sleep here, how quickly the darkness would become normal, how the low ceiling would turn into a boundary rather than a threat, how shared warmth would feel natural rather than intrusive. The underground favours those who do not argue with it. People noticed this long ago, often with surprise. Children slept deeply through storms that kept adults awake. They stopped asking about the weather above after only a few nights. For them, this space became the world, not a shelter from it. You imagine a small body curled close to others, breathing slow and even. No tension in the shoulders, no restless shifting. Sleep comes easily when the environment stops changing its mind. Adults, by contrast, needed time. They listened longer. They checked more often. They brought the surface world with them into the dark. Only repetition loosened that grip. There is a quiet lesson in this difference. Adaptation is not about strength or knowledge. It is about willingness. The underground rewards those who accept its rules quickly. You notice how your own responses have begun to resemble that ease. Earlier you catalogued every sensation. Now sensations pass without comment. That shift mirrors the way children stop narrating their experience once they feel safe. Some families arrange sleeping spaces with this in mind. Children were placed where warmth was most stable, not because they were fragile, but because their calm benefited everyone else. A sleeping child meant the night was going well. You feel the logic of that now. Calm spreads, rest spreads. One relaxed body encourages another. The underground amplifies this effect by keeping distractions low. There is a memory in some winter accounts of children waking up disappointed when storms ended. Not because they liked cold, but because the underground nights felt special. They were quieter, slower, full of closeness. Morning meant separation again. You understand how that could happen. There is something contained and complete about nights like this. The outside world feels distant. The inside world feels sufficient. You think about how adulthood complicates rest, how awareness becomes vigilance, how comfort feels earned rather than given. Underground, that burden slowly lifts. You're allowed to rest without justification. Your body reflects that a permission. Muscles remain loose, breath remains deep. There is no internal debate about whether it is safe to let go. You've already answered that question enough times. The underground does not care how old you are. It responds the same way to every body, but bodies respond differently to it. Some resist longer, some settle quickly. Tonight you can settle. You feel a quiet gratitude for that. Not dramatic, just steady, the kind that does not demand expression. If there were children nearby, they would already be asleep. You would know by the stillness, by the absence of small movements. That image brings a faint smile even in the dark. You let that image fade. It has done its work. It reminds you that rest does not require understanding everything. It requires trusting what works. Your breathing slows further. Thoughts lose structure. The underground has finished teaching for the night. Like a child who has stopped asking questions, you accept the dark, the quiet, the closeness without resistance. Sleep deepens again, smooth and unbroken, while winter continues somewhere far above, no longer relevant to the small, calm world you occupy beneath the earth. Dreams arrive differently underground. They do not burst in with colour or motion. They seep in quietly, shaped by pressure and dark rather than light and sound. You notice this only after waking briefly when fragments linger, without edges, like impressions left on soft earth. Sleep has depth here, not just length but layers. You drift down through them slowly without the sudden drops that sometimes jolt you awake above ground. The underground seems to cushion the descent. Nothing pulls you back abruptly. Nothing interrupts without reason. When dreams come, they feel close. Not vivid scenes playing out in front of you, but sensations unfolding from within. Weight, warmth, stillness. Familiar places that do not need to be seen to be recognized. You remember dreaming of rooms without walls, of spaces defined only by comfort. The dream does not explain itself. It does not need to. It exists, then fades, leaving behind a sense of ease rather than confusion. Some nights dreams barely form at all. Sleep stretches uninterrupted like a held breath that never becomes a thought. You wake later with the sense that time has passed gently without incident. You notice how rarely dreams here involve the storm. Wind and snow lose their drama underground. They do not chase you through sleep. They are absorbed by the earth before they can reach your imagination. Above ground, weather often invades dreams. Thunder becomes footsteps. Wind turns into voices. Underground, those transformations rarely happen. The mind has fewer raw materials to work with. You think about how the environment shapes what the mind creates at rest. When inputs are limited, dreams simplify. They return to fundamentals. Sensation replaces spectacle. There is a faint memory of someone once mentioning that underground dreams felt heavier, slower, harder to recall, not unpleasant, just different, as if the mind itself moved at the same pace as the earth around it. You feel that slowness now. Thoughts drift without urgency. Even dreaming feels optional rather than necessary. Your body remains warm and supported. That comfort carries into sleep. There is no need for the mind to stay alert. No signals demanding interpretation. When you surface bravely from sleep, it feels like floating up through layers rather than snapping awake. Awareness returns gently. You recognize where you are without surprise. Darkness remains complete. Quiet remains intact. You let yourself sink back down easily. Sleep resumes where it left off. Dreams return softer this time. Fragments of memory, a table, a low ceiling, hands moving slowly in warm air. None of it demands narrative, it simply passes. You realize that underground sleep feels less like escaping the day and more like stepping sideways out of it. The mind is not racing ahead or replaying behind, it is resting in place. There are no clocks here to divide sleep into segments, no light to signal when dreaming should end. The mind follows its own rhythm. Sometimes dreams dissolve entirely and leave only sensation behind. A sense of being held, a sense of depth, a feeling that the world has narrowed to exactly what you need. You breathe steadily through it all. Even breath becomes part of the dream. Inhale and exhale blur into the same slow motion. You do not remember falling asleep again. That transition happens without you. Later, when awareness returns briefly, you notice how calm you feel. There is no confusion, no disorientation. You know where you are, you know you are safe. That certainty carries you back into sleep once more. Dreams here do not ask to be remembered. They do not leave puzzles behind. They serve their purpose quietly and disappear. Your body remains still throughout. Muscles do not twitch. Limbs do not flail. Sleep is deep enough to keep movement unnecessary. You think briefly, not fully awake, that this kind of sleep feels older somehow, as if it belongs to a time before constant stimulation, before nights were broken into fragments by noise and light. That thought fades without finishing itself. Sleep continues. The underground holds you through it, pressing gently from all sides, limiting distractions, allowing the mind to rest without performance. Dreams come and go as they please, or perhaps they simply pass beneath your awareness unnoticed. Either way, rest deepens. Above ground, the world resets itself slowly. Snow settles, wind calms, shapes change. None of that enters your sleep. Below ground, nothing needs to change. Everything is already stable enough to support rest. You remain in that stability, drifting through sleep that feels less like absence and more like quiet presence, until dreaming itself becomes unnecessary and only rest remains. Waking underground does not come with a signal. There is no pale light creeping in at the edges of your vision, no birds announcing themselves, no gradual brightening to negotiate with your eyes. Awareness returns because the body is ready, not because the world insists. You surface solely as if rising through warm water. Thought arrives before movement. Sensation follows. The ground is still firm beneath you. The air feels unchanged. Nothing has shifted dramatically while you slept. You lie still for a moment, not out of caution, but because there is no reason to hurry. Above ground, mornings often feel urgent. Cold air demands movement. Light demands attention. Underground morning is optional, it waits for you. You notice how rested you feel. Not just less tired, but settled. Muscles feel loose. Joints move easily when you test them. There is no stiffness waiting to be worked out. Sleep has done what it was supposed to do. You flex your fingers and toes gently. Everything responds without complaint. That small test reassures you. The night passed without asking anything of you. The darkness remains complete. If it is morning above, you cannot tell. Time here is measured by readiness rather than clocks. When hunger returns, when thirst appears, when the body decides it has had enough rest. Some people describe this as disorienting at first. Waking without light removed a familiar anchor. Over time, many came to appreciate it. Morning stopped feeling imposed. They became chosen. You feel that choice now. You could stay where you are longer, sleep a little more, or you could rise. Either option feels acceptable. There is no pressure. The air feels slightly cooler than it did earlier, but only barely. That subtle change suggests the storm has passed its peak. Heat stored in the ground has begun its slow release back into the surrounding earth. The underground communicates morning through nuance rather than announcement. You breathe deeply and notice how quiet everything remains. No one rushes to move. No tools clatter. No voices break the stillness. Morning arrives softly here, respecting the space. You sit up slowly, testing how your body feels in motion. There is no dizziness, no shock of cold. The transition is smooth. That smoothness feels like a small luxury. You think about how different this is from waking above ground in winter, crawling out from under blankets into cold air, rushing to restore circulation. Underground warmth lingers long enough to make waking gentle. There is a faint awareness of the world beyond these walls. Snow covering everything, tracks erased, the landscape reshaped. You will see it soon enough. For now it exists as an idea rather than a demand. You stretch carefully, mindful of the low ceiling even in the dark. That awareness has become instinctive. Movements adjust automatically to the space you are in. You feel calm, not sleepy, not alert, balanced. The night has done its work without drama. Some mornings underground passed without any sense of victory or relief. They simply happened. Survival did not need to be celebrated. It needed to be repeated. You understand that now, waking is not an event, it is a continuation. You remain seated for a moment longer, listening to your own breath, feeling the temperature of the air, noticing how the space feels after a full night of rest. Nothing feels wrong, nothing feels urgent. That absence of urgency is perhaps the most striking difference. Morning does not push you forward, it waits. When you eventually move again, it will be because you choose to, because hunger returns, because light is needed, because tasks await, not because the night forced you out. You take one last steady breath and prepare to rise fully. The underground releases you gradually without resistance, having held you safely through the storm and the dark. Whatever the world looks like above you will meet it rested, unhurried and warm enough to face the day. You leave the shelter briefly, not because you need to, but because curiosity returns before urgency does. The decision feels light, optional. You prepare without rushing, layering just enough to meet the air outside without shocking your body. Underground warmth lingers on your skin as you move toward the entrance, a quiet buffer you will carry with you. Cold greets you immediately, but it is not hostile. It feels honest, clean. The kind of cold that belongs to a world that has finished its work for the night. Snow lies deeper than you expected, smoothing edges, softening shapes. The storm did more while you slept than you realized. You pause just outside, letting your eyes adjust to the brightness. Even muted winter light feels sharp after complete darkness. You blink slowly, grounding yourself. Breath leaves your mouth in a pale cloud, drifting away instead of hanging close as it did below. The contrast is striking. Above ground, the cold moves. It brushes against your face, slips into seams, tests openings. Underground cold waited its turn as it resumes its wandering. You listen. The world sounds different after a storm. There is a kind of hush that settles when snow absorbs noise. No wind now, no movement, just distant. You do not stay long. This visit is not about working or assessing damage. It is about reminding yourself why you return below. A few breaths are enough. People who slept underground often describe these brief excursions as recalibrations. Stepping outside reset expectations. It made the shelter feel warmer, by comparison more intentional. You feel that effect immediately. You brush snow from your boots and duck back inside. The entrance narrows the world again. Light fades. Sound compresses. Warmth returns more quickly than you expected. Inside, the underground greets you exactly as you left it. Calm, dim, reliable. Nothing shifted while you were gone. That consistency feels reassuring after the exposure above. You shed outer layers, carefully mindful not to introduce moisture. Snow melts fast underground. Water is less welcome than cold. You place damp items where air can reach them later, not near where you will rest again tonight. As you settle back down, you notice how your body relaxes almost instantly. Shoulders drop, breath slows. The underground reclaims you with familiar efficiency. This brief contrast has clarified something. The shelter does not isolate you from the world, it filters it. You can step out when needed, then return when finished. That control feels empowering rather than restrictive. You think about how people learn to time these trips. Midday when light was strongest, short windows between storms. All was brief, always deliberate. The underground was not an escape, it was a base. You feel gratitude for that base now. It allows you to experience winter without being consumed by it. You can witness the aftermath without enduring the full force. Your senses settle again. The air smells familiar. Earth and soak and quiet human presence. That scent signals safety now rather than novelty. You lie back down, replaying the outside world briefly in your mind. The smooth snow, the bright stillness, the cold that moved freely. Then you let those images go. They belong elsewhere. Inside, everything feels contained. Warmth redistributes. Stillness returns. There is a subtle shift in how you perceive time after stepping outside. The underground feels slower by comparison, less reactive. That slowness invites rest rather than boredom. You close your eyes again, even though it changes nothing. Darkness remains complete. The memory of light fades quickly. You realize that this rhythm, stepping out briefly and returning below, shapes how winter is experienced. The shelter becomes a reference point. Everything else is measured against it. People who live this way often spoke of the underground as a place that reset the body. After exposure, returning felt like relief. After rest, leaving felt manageable. The balance mattered. You feel that balance now, neither trapped nor exposed, simply choosing where to be. Your body remains warm, breath stays slow, muscles soften again. The storm that once dominated your thoughts has been reduced to evidence on the ground. Snow piled quietly. Cold waiting patiently. Neither demands your attention now. You drift back towards rest, carrying the outside world only as a faint memory. The underground resumes its role, holding warmth, dampening sound, and offering the same steady conditions that allowed you to sleep so deeply before. This brief departure has done its work. You have seen enough, felt enough. Winter can continue outside without you. Below ground comfort returns easily, and with it the quiet confidence that you can move between worlds without losing yourself to either. You settle in content to let the day begin above while you remain where rest still feels natural, protected by layers of soil and the knowledge that you can step out again whenever you choose. Maintenance happens in the margins of winter, not during its loudest moments. You feel this instinctively now. No one repairs anything while storms are still pressing down. Work waits for pauses, for calm, for those brief stretches when the world stops demanding immediate survival and allows careful hands. This is one of those moments. You notice it in the way the air feels settled, not strained. In the absence of urgency in your body. The shelter is not asking anything of you right now, but you know from experience that this is when attention matters most. You move slowly, deliberately touching familiar points without light. The entrance covering feels secure. The edges lie flat. No drafts slip through. Your fingers remember the texture, the resistance. That memory is more reliable than sight ever was. Underground maintenance is quiet and preventative. It is about noticing before fixing becomes necessary. A wall that feels cooler than usual. A corner where moisture lingers longer. A support that creaks differently than it did last week. These are not emergencies, they are conversations. You rest your palm against the earth and feel its temperature. Steady. That steadiness tells you the insulation is still doing its job. Soil holds heat the way water holds memory. It changes slowly, giving you time to respond. You think about how different this feels from repairs above ground. There, damage announces itself dramatically. Broken boards, torn fabric, collapsed roofs. Underground problems whisper first, and if you listen, you can address them quietly. You adjust a small wedge of wood near the entrance, tightening a gap that was barely noticeable. The movement is minimal. The effect is immediate. Air settles, the space feels complete again. These small actions carry a sense of calm satisfaction. Not accomplishment exactly, more like alignment. Everything fits the way it should. Some shelters required constant attention. Others seemed to hold together with little effort. The difference often came down to early choices, location, shape, drainage. Those decisions echoed through every winter night that followed. You benefit from those decisions now. Maintenance feels like fine-tuning rather than rescue. That distinction matters when energy is limited. You sit back and listen. The underground answers with silence. That is a good sign. Nothing complains. Nothing shifts unexpectedly. Your body mirrors that calm. Movements remain slow. Breath steady. There is no rush to finish, no checklist to complete. You are simply responding to what you feel. A faint line of cooler air brushes your wrist. You trace it to its source, a place where fabric meets earth. You adjust it slightly, pressing it into place. The coolness disappears. Problem solved before it became one. This kind of attention becomes habitual over the time. You stop thinking of it as work. It becomes part of inhabiting the space, like adjusting your position in bed or pulling a blanket closer. You imagine people doing this by instinct after years underground. No discussion, no planning, just hands moving where they were needed. Maintenance woven into daily life rather than scheduled apart from it. You realise that this is why shelters like this endured. Not because they were perfect, but because they were responsive. They allowed small corrections to matter. When you finish, you settle back into stillness. The space feels slightly better than it did before. Not warmer exactly, more balanced. You think briefly about how fragile above-ground structures can feel in winter. How every storm threatens to undo weeks of work. Underground storms pass overhead without testing the shelter directly. The work you do now will likely hold through the next one. That reliability is comforting. It allows rest to return quickly. You lie back down, feeling how evenly warmth spreads again. The ground responds immediately to stillness holding what it has. Maintenance fades from your thoughts. It has done its job and no longer demands attention. Your awareness softens. The body recognizes that nothing else needs tending right now. No leaks, no drafts, no shifting supports. Everything's quiet. This is how winter survival stretches out over months. Not through heroic effort, but through countless small acts done at the right time, then released. You feel the cumulative effect of those acts now. The shelter feels trustworthy because it has been cared for without drama. As sleep returns, you carry that trust with you. The underground has proven again that it can be relied upon when given just enough attention. The storm above has no influence here anymore. Its work is finished for the moment. Below the shelter holds steady, prepared to do the same thing again when needed. You drift back towards rest, confident that nothing has been overlooked. Maintenance is complete, balance restored. Warmth settles, air stills, the night resumes its quiet rhythm. You let go knowing that the care you gave the space will carry you comfortably through whatever comes next, and that winter, for all its persistence, will find nothing fragile to exploit here. The space begins to feel smaller though nothing has changed. The walls have not moved. The ceiling remains where it has always been. The distance between you and the entrance is the same as last night, and yet something feels closer. You notice it first in how carefully you move, your gestures tighten. You're more aware of elbows, knees, the arc of your arms. Not because the shelter has shrunk, but because familiarity has sharpened your awareness of its limits. This sensation does not arrive suddenly. It builds slowly over many nights spent within the same boundaries. The underground teaches you exactly how much room you have, and once you learn it, you cannot unlearn it. You sit still and let the feeling exist without labeling it. It is not discomfort. It is not fear. It is awareness. The kind that comes from long residence rather than surprise. People who spent entire seasons underground often describe this phase quietly. They did not frame it as claustrophobia. They framed it as readiness. When the space begins to feel small, it means you know it well enough to notice every edge. You feel that readiness now. You could navigate this shelter blindfolded, and in many ways you already do. Your hands know where the walls curve, your feet know where the floor dips. Even your breath adjusts instinctively to the shape of the room. There is a subtle restlessness that accompanies this stage. Not agitation, but anticipation. The underground has given you everything it can for now. Warmth, quiet, protection. The mind begins to stretch toward what comes next. You imagine the sky above without seeing it. You imagine the cold air moving freely again. These thoughts do not pull you upward yet. They simply hover at the edge of awareness. This feeling has been interpreted differently by different people. Some welcomed it as a sign that winter was loosening its grip. Others felt it as a gentle pressure to move on. Either way, it marked a shift. You notice how your sleep has changed slightly. Still deep, still calm, but lighter at the edges. You wake more easily. Not because you're cold or disturbed, but because you're no longer fully settled into the space. The underground senses this too in its own way. Heat distribution feels familiar enough that you no longer marvel at it. Silence feels expected. These gifts have become normal, and the mind looks for novelty once comfort stabilizes. You stretch and feel the ceiling closer than before, though it has not moved. That closeness does not alarm you. It simply reminds you that the space was always meant to be temporary. Underground shelters were rarely permanent destinations. They were seasonal solutions, places to wait out what could not be fought directly. When conditions shifted, people shifted with them. You feel the beginning of that shift now, not urgency, just readiness. Your body remains calm. There is no spike of discomfort. Just a quiet sense that you could leave if you needed to. That option feels present again where earlier it felt irrelevant. You lie back down and breathe slowly. The underground still holds you comfortably. Nothing has failed. Nothing is wrong. The space has simply completed its work. You allow that thought to settle. It brings no sadness, no impatience, just clarity. This stage does not last long. It is a threshold rather than a destination. A sign that the relationship between you and the shelter is changing. You remember how earlier the underground felt like the only reasonable place to be. Now it feels like one of several possibilities. That is progress. The storm season is not over yet, but it no longer feels endless. You sense that without evidence. The body often knows before the calendar does. You remain where you are for now, still content, still protected. But awareness has shifted outward just enough to make room for what comes next. The underground remains steady beneath you, unchanged and reliable. It does not resist this shift. It does not cling. It simply remains available until you no longer need it. You close your eyes again, resting within that awareness. The space feels smaller, but not because it has failed you. It feels smaller because you have grown accustomed to it. Sleep comes easily once more, lighter than before, but still peaceful, carried by the understanding that this shelter has done exactly what it was meant to do. You start to notice the season easing before there is any proof. The change does not announce itself with warmth or light. It arrives as a subtle loosening, a sense that the nights no longer press quite as hard as they once did. You feel it in the way your body settles. Earlier in the winter, sleep felt necessary, almost urgent. Rest was something you needed to defend. Now it feels more generous. You sleep because you cannot, because you must. The underground reflects this shift quietly. The air no longer feels as dense. Warmth still holds, but it does not cling as tightly. The space remains protective, but it has relaxed its grip. You listen for the storm and hear very little. Not silence exactly, but a lack of insistence. Whatever weather passes above does so without force. It no longer feels like something that must be endured. It feels like something that will pass on its own. Your body responds to this change before your thoughts do. Muscles feel lighter. Breathing deepens without effort. There is no longer a sense of bracing even in sleep. You think about how people once waited out winters like this without calendars or forecasts. They relied on sensation, on the way nights felt different, on the way cold stopped feeling absolute and started feeling temporary. You feel that temporariness now. Cold still exists, but it no longer defines everything. It has edges. It has limits. There is a quiet habit that some people develop during this part of the season. They began leaving small gaps uncovered, testing the night. A little air allowed you to move. A door held open just slightly longer. These were not neat risks. They were questions. You find yourself asking similar questions without acting on them yet. How cold is it really? How long would you stay warm if you shifted positions? The answers matter less than the asking. The questions themselves signal change. Sleep becomes lighter in a pleasant way. You wake more easily, not because something is wrong, but because your body no longer needs to retreat as deeply. Rest is still complete. It simply does not need to be as heavy. You notice how thoughts wander toward the future more often. Not plans exactly, just possibilities. Movement, light, space. The underground has begun to feel like one chapter rather than the whole story. The shelter does not resist this shift. It continues to offer the same protection, the same steadiness, but you sense that you are no longer depending on it in the same way. This is not impatience, it is readiness. You lie still and let that readiness exist without pushing it forward. Winter has taught you the value of waiting. You will not rush now. The underground remains quiet, but the quiet feels different. Less insulating, more neutral. Silence is no longer something you lean on, it is simply there. You breathe slowly, noticing how easily warmth returns after a small movement. Earlier in the season, movement was costly, now it feels forgiving. Heat gathers again without protest. You realize that this is how winters end, not abruptly but gradually. The body releases its grip before the weather does. Survival relaxes into living. You remember how earlier nights felt endless, how storms seemed to stack without pause. Tonight the idea of another storm does not weigh on you. It feels manageable. You allow yourself to imagine sleeping above ground again just briefly. The thought does not feel reckless. It feels reasonable. Still you remain here. The underground continues to serve you well. There is no need to leave yet. Readiness does not require action. You close your eyes again and let sleep return lighter than before, carried by the sense that the hardest part of winter has already passed, even if no one has said it out loud. The shelter holds you through the night as it always has, but now it feels less like a refuge from danger and more like a place you are finishing with. Rest comes easily. The underground does its quiet work one more time, knowing that its role is slowly, naturally coming to an end. You realize you slept above ground without planning to. The thought comes to you gently, not as a revelation but as a mild surprise, like noticing the window open after a quiet night. You wake and for a moment nothing feels unusual. Warmth lingers, your body feels rested, breath moves easily, then awareness widens just enough for you to understand where you are. Not below the earth, not wrapped in some soil and silence. You're higher now, closer to air that moves freely. There is no sense of triumph attached to this realization. No marker in your mind that says something important has happened. You simply notice that the underground did not claim you last night and that the world did not punish you for it. You lie still and take inventory. No stiffness, no ache from cold, no lingering tension from listening through the dark. The night passed without negotiation. This is how transitions often happen. Quietly, without permission. You do not decide to stop needing the shelter. You discover that you already have. You think back to the nights when sleeping above ground felt impossible, when every sound demanded attention, when cold moved aggressively, testing every layer. That version of winter feels distant now, not because it ended suddenly, but because your relationship to it changed. The underground taught you how to rest deeply. It taught your body what warmth actually feels like, what safety feels like, what stillness can do. Those lessons did not stay behind when you came back up. You shift slightly and notice how your body responds. Movement does not invite cold the way it once did. Heat gathers again easily. The night air feels mild enough to tolerate without strategy. This does not mean winter is gone. It means winter no longer dictates every decision. You think about how often people expect endings to announce themselves. A final storm, a clear morning, a dramatic change. In reality, seasons loosen their grip, slowly testing boundaries, retreating a little at a time. Last night was one of those tests. You did not stay awake, listening for danger. You did not brace. You slept the way you slept underground, trusting the environment to behave. That trust was not misplaced. Your mind drifts back to the shelter below. It feels smaller now, not physically, but in importance. It is still there, still capable, still reliable, and you're simply not leaning on it the same way. That realization carries no regret, only appreciation. You sit up slowly and let the air move around you. It feels different here, less contained, more variable, but not hostile. The sharpness that once defined winter nights has softened. You notice the sounds first, not louder but more numerous. Distant movement, subtle shifts. The world above is never as quiet as the world below. Even after storms, it hums faintly with activity. Your body does not react to those sounds with alarm. It registers them and lets them pass. The underground taught you how to listen selectively. That skill follows you here. You breathe in and out a few times, testing the night. Nothing presses, nothing insides. The air carries a hint of cold, but it does not cling, it moves on. You understand now why people sometimes struggle to explain when winter truly ended for them. It was not a date. It was a night like this, a night when nothing went wrong without the shelter. You think about returning underground tonight. The idea does not feel urgent. It feels optional. That is the difference. The shelter has shifted from necessity to choice. You feel a quiet pride in that though it does not rise to the surface as emotion, It sits deeper, like satisfaction earned without fanfare. The underground did not fail you. It completed its role. It carried you through the worst of the season and released you when it was no longer required. You realised that this release was never formal. No moment of closure, no farewell. Just a gradual easing. The way you stop using crutches without noticing your weight has shifted back onto your own legs. You stand and stretch, feeling how the air responds. Your body warms itself without effort. Blood moves easily. Muscles feel awake but not tense. Above ground sleep no longer feels reckless, it feels earned. You glance toward where the shelter entrance lies, though you cannot see it clearly from here. The thought of it brings comfort rather than dependence. You know where it is. You know what it offers. That knowledge is enough. The night continues quietly. You do not rush to fill it with plans. Morning will arrive when it arrives. You remain aware that weather can still change. Another storm could come. Cold could return sharply. The underground has not vanished. It remains an option, a backup, a trusted place. But for now you're here, and here is enough. You let that understanding settle without turning it into a promise. Seasons do not make promises. They offer patterns and exceptions in equal measure. You lie back down and let your eyes close again. Not because you are tired, but because rest feels natural in this moment. Sleep comes easily lighter than before, free of vigilance. Somewhere beneath you the earth holds steady. Somewhere above you the sky stretches wide. You rest between them, no longer hidden, no longer exposed, simply present, carrying the quiet lessons of the underground with you as winter continues its slow, unremarkable retreat. You return underground out of habit more than need. The motion feels familiar, almost ceremonial, like checking a door that no longer requires locking. You lower yourself back into the space and notice immediately how unchanged it is. Same cool walls, same muted air, same steady quiet. Nothing here reacts to your absence. That realization carries a gentle weight. The shelter does not feel abandoned, but it also does not feel necessary in the way it once did. It waits without expectation. It offers what it always has without asking whether you will accept. You sit for a while instead of lying down. The posture feels different now. Earlier in the winter, sitting underground meant conserving heat, staying small. Now it feels optional, comfortable but not essential. You breathe in the familiar scent of earth and faint smoke. It no longer feels novel or deeply reassuring. It feels known. Familiarity has replaced dependence. Your body responds accordingly. Muscles do not sink as deeply. Breathing remains relaxed but alert. You could rest here easily, but you do not feel pulled downward into sleep. This change does not feel like loss, it feels like completion. You think back to your first nights here, how the underground demanded attention, how every sound and sensation mattered, how your body clung to stillness as a survival tactic. That intensity has softened into memory. The shelter taught you how to slow down, how to listen without reacting, how to trust consistency. Those lessons remain with you even as your reliance fades. You run your hand along the wall once more. The texture feels the same, but your response has changed. Earlier touch was reassurance. Now it is acknowledgement. Some people describe this moment as gratitude replacing necessity. The shelter becomes something you appreciate rather than something you require. You feel that shift clearly. You sit quietly noticing how the space feels smaller than it once did, not because it has changed, but because your awareness has expanded beyond it again. The underground no longer contains your entire world. You listen for the storm and hear nothing urgent. Whatever weather exists above does not announce itself here anymore. The underground continues to do its job even when you are not asking it. That reliability inspires a calm confidence. You know you could sleep here again if conditions demanded it. You also know you could live without consequence. You think about how many nights this place carried you through, how many storms passed overhead while you rested below. Those nights blend together now, not as individual memories, but as a continuous stretch of endurance. Endurance has a strange after effect. Once it is no longer required that the body releases it slowly, you feel that release now. Your breathing remains steady. Your posture relaxes without sinking. You are comfortable without needing to surrender completely. This is how winter shelters often faded from daily use. Not abruptly, but gradually. People returned less often, stayed for shorter periods, used them as fallback rather than default. You feel that transition happening within you. The underground is still respected, still trusted, but no longer central. You stand and stretch carefully, mindful of the ceiling out of long habit. Even that awareness feels automatic now. The shelter has shaped your movements in ways that will persist. You pause before leaving, not out of hesitation, but out of recognition. This place mattered. It did important work. It deserves a moment of attention before you move on. You do not speak. You do not mark the moment. You simply acknowledge it internally and let it pass. As you move back toward the surface, the underground remains behind you, unchanged and patient. It does not follow. It does not recede. It stays exactly where it is. You carry its quiet with you. The way it taught you to listen. The way it taught you to rest without anxiety. The way it reduced winter to something manageable. Those lessons feel portable now. You step away knowing that the underground has not been left behind. It has been integrated. It lives in how you pause before sleeping, how you notice drafts, how you trust stillness. The shelter did not just protect you from winter. It reshaped how you experience comfort and safety. That reshaping remains long after you stop sleeping beneath the soil. You move on, calm and unhurried, aware that you're no longer dependent but permanently changed by what the underground offered during the hardest part of the season. You carry the underground with you now, even when you no longer sleep beneath the soil. It shows up quietly in ways that do not announce themselves. The way you pause before settling down for the night. The way you notice air movement immediately. The way you trust routine over impulse when comfort is on the line. Nothing about this feels dramatic. The underground did not leave a mark you can point to. It left habits, sensitivities, a different relationship with quiet. You notice it the first time you lie down above ground and do not rush to adjust everything. You wait. You let the space tell you how it behaves. That patience was learned below where rushing only stirred cold and wasted warmth. You notice it when a distant sound does not pull you fully awake. You register it, decide it does not matter, and return to rest. The underground taught you that not every noise deserves attention. Even light feels different now. You tolerate darkness more easily. You no longer need to fill it with distraction. Nights feel like something to enter rather than something to defend against. Your body remembers how to be still without tension. Muscles soften without collapsing. Breath deepens without effort. That ease follows you wherever you sleep. You think about how many nights underground reshape these responses, not through instruction but through repetition. The shelter never explained itself. It simply worked night after night until your body learned to trust it. That trust did not disappear when you left, it transferred. You notice drafts immediately now, not with irritation, but with curiosity. You understand how air moves, how small changes matter. You adjust thoughtfully rather than reactively. There is a quiet confidence in this, not bravado, just familiarity with discomfort and how to manage it calmly. You realize that winter no longer feels like something that happens to you. It feels like something you move through with awareness. The underground gave you that perspective. You remember the nights when storms felt endless, how being below ground reduced them to background events. That memory lingers, making future hardships feel more contained. The underground did not make winter disappear. It made it understandable, predictable enough to rest through. You notice how that understanding extends beyond weather. Silence feels less empty. Stillness feels less threatening. Waiting feels more natural. These changes are subtle. Someone watching you would not notice them. They live inside decisions you make without thinking. You sit with that realization for a moment, not to analyze it, but to let it settle. The underground was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to teach you how to endure without exhausting yourself. Once learned, that lesson stays. You breathe in slowly and let it out just as slowly. The rhythm feels familiar, borrowed from nights spent listening to nothing at all. You think about how many people before you learned similar lessons in similar ways without naming them. How many slept below ground and emerged changed even if they never articulated how. Those lessons travel quietly through time. They do not need to be recorded to persist. You feel ready to let the story soften now, There is nothing left to explain, nothing left to prove. The underground has finished its work. You lie back wherever you are now and notice how easily rest arrives. That ease is not accidental. It was earned one quiet night at a time. The world above continues to change. Seasons shift. Weather returns and retreats. None of that feels overwhelming anymore. You close your eyes and let the last images fade. Soil, silence. Warmth held steady. Storms muted into distant pressure. The underground remains somewhere beneath you, unchanged and patient. It does not need you anymore. You do not need it in the same way. What remains is calm. Your breathing slows, thoughts lengthen, the edges of awareness soften. Everything you needed from those nights below the earth has already been carried forward. There is nothing left to do but rest. The story slows now, not because it has reached an ending, but because endings are no longer required. You are already where you need to be. The images loosen their grip. Details blur gently the way shapes do when you stop focusing on them. You breathe in slow and easy and feel how little effort it takes to stay warm now. Not because the world is perfect, but because you have learned how to meet it without tension. The underground does not vanish from your awareness. It simply becomes quiet background knowledge, like knowing where home is even when you are not there. That knowledge is enough. Your body settles more deeply. Weight distributes evenly. Muscles release what they have been holding all night, all season. Thoughts arrive slower now. They do not need to finish themselves. Half-formed ideas drift through and dissolve before becoming words. You are safe enough to let them go. Breath moves in and out steady and unremarkable. Each one brings a little more calm. Each one carries away what is no longer needed. The night stretches comfortably around you. No demands, no surprises. Just time passing in a way that does not ask for attention. You rest in that space between waking and sleep where nothing is urgent and everything feels manageable. The underground taught you this pace. The earth held it steady long enough for you to learn. Now you carry it on your own. On your own. Your eyes remain closed. The room, whatever it is, stays quiet. The world waits politely. Sleep moves closer, soft and unforced, like something you're already halfway inside. There is nothing left to listen for. Nothing left to adjust. You let yourself drift, fully carried by the calm you earned, surrounded by quiet that feels familiar and kind. Sweet dream.